and I'd like to welcome everybody here and call to order the April 22nd, 2013 City of Milton regular council meeting. And see if our
Mayor, I'm your clerk tonight.
You're our clerk, so if you would call roll and make general announcements.
I will. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be happy to call roll for the April 22nd, 2013 regular meeting. I'd like to remind those in attendance to please silence all cell phones at this time. Additionally, those attending the meeting would like to provide public comment. Either during the public hearings or during the call for public comment, you're required to complete a public comment card prior to speaking on an item. There is no public comment for consent agenda items or items under first presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in the order that the speaker cards were received by the staff prior to the beginning of tonight's meeting. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization if applicable. The City Council may allow public comment on either an agenda item or general public comment from a representative of such an organized group or association, provided, however, that such an individual shall file a notarized affidavit that they have the authority to speak on behalf of said organization on a form provided by the clerk prior to the agenda item being called. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, cheering, booing, outbursts, or dialogue with any person speaking. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you would expect to receive yourself. Anyone in violation will be asked to leave. As I call roll, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Joe Lockwood?
Here.
Councilmember Karen Thurman?
Here.
Councilmember Matt Kuntz?
Here.
Councilmember Bill Lusk?
Here.
Councilmember Joe Longoria?
Here.
Councilmember Lance Large?
Here.
Would everyone please
I'm here
rise?
too. Bird's
Yeah,
here too. But I can leave if you'd like.
Oh, this is here? Councilmember Bert Hewitt.
I'm here.
Great.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you again. I want to welcome everybody here tonight, and we'll start with our first item, approval of the meeting agenda. Mr. City Clerk,
Approval of the meeting agenda. It's agenda item number 13097. Timing tonight, Mayor and Council, I'd ask that you might consider one modification that's in the zoning agenda, moving item number 3, which is agenda item number 13090, to the first item in the zoning agenda. Other than that, we have no recommendations for changes.
Okay. Anything council side? If not, I'll open up for a motion on our meeting agenda approval.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as modified by the city manager / clerk.
Second. Okay, a motion by Councilmember Hewitt, seconded by Councilmember Longoria to approve the agenda as stated, and with the amendment of changing item number 3 on zoning to the first item. Okay, if our to say, do we have any public comment?
General public comment? No general public
Okay.
comment, but we are going to need a motion and a vote on the approval.
We made
Okay.
motion, we just need to vote.
I'm sorry, yeah, we got a motion and a second, but need a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, any public comment? Move on to the consent agenda. If the city clerk would please read the consent agenda items.
Consent agenda, item 1, approval of the March 26, 2013 special called City Council meeting minutes. It's agenda item number 13-098. Approval of the April 8, 2013 regular City Council meeting minutes. It's agenda item number 13-0099. Third, approval of the April 15, 2013 work session meeting minutes. It's agenda item number 13-100. And fourth, approval of the financial statements for the period ending March 2013, agenda item number 13-101.
Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda as prepared by staff.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Lusk, second by Councilmember Kuntz. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, we'll move on to our reports and presentations. The first one is I will be presenting a proclamation for recognizing Arbor Day. I'll read the proclamation first. Arbor Day. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas the Tree City USA program sponsored by the National Arbor Day Foundation provides direction, technical assistance, public attention, and national recognition for urban and community forestry programs in thousands of towns and cities that more than 93 million Americans call home. And whereas the city of Milton was recognized as a tree city in 2011, and whereas trees are among Milton's most beautiful natural resources and bestow fine opportunities for aesthetic appreciation and are indispensable to our ecology as providers of wildlife habitat, erosion control, air filters, moderators of temperature, and noise inhibitors. And whereas, as citizens of Milton, we enjoy the beauty and benefit of our natural environment, which increases property values, enhances the economic vitality of business areas, and whereas it is the responsibility of each of us to safeguard the environment and make choices that have a positive impact on our environment and the world in which we live. And whereas the city of Milton and our citizens are committed to the observation and stewardship of our natural resources, and now, therefore, we, the mayor and the city council of the city of Milton, hereby recognize and proclaim April 26, 2013 as Arbor Day and urge all citizens to support efforts to protect our trees and our environment and make Milton an even greater place to live, work, and raise a family. And further, we urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Given under my hand and seal, the city of Milton, Georgia, on this 22nd day of April, 2013. And I'm going to present this proclamation to our city arborist, Mark Law, and I believe we've also got some folks here that also would like to ask them to come forward as we present this, and like to ask the council to join me.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Lockwood, I'd like to introduce people with Cogburn Woods Elementary Environmental Club. They assisted in some tree planting. They recognized Arbor Day a couple of weeks ago, and the students did a tree planting at their school. We had Ms. Kyle Watson and Michelle Rosenbaum, and I don't know the children's names, but I'm sure. Okay, and we thank you for your assistance and the children that helped do the planting that day and the program that Cindy helped participate in. One thing we got too, the city has continued to maintain the Tree City USA designation. We have this plaque here from the National Arbor Day Foundation. Nice little plaque here, and then we got the Tree City flag. One day we put up at our new city hall.
See if we can hold this up for a picture. You guys want to? You want to help hold this up?
I'm gonna pretend like I didn't hear that.
You don't want to hear anything.
Okay, the next proclamation that I have is going to present for recognizing Building Safety Month. I see we've got Wade is here, and we read the proclamation first. Whereas our city's continuing efforts to address the critical issues of safety, energy efficiency, and sustainability in the built environment that affects our citizens both in everyday life and in times of natural disaster gives us confidence that our structures are safe and sound. And whereas our confidence is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardians, building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, laborers, and others in the construction industry who work year-round to ensure the safe construction of buildings. And whereas the international codes are the adopted building safety, energy, and accessibility codes for the state of Georgia and are intended to safeguard the public from natural disasters such as hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes. And whereas Building Safety Month is sponsored by the International Code Council, International Code Council Foundation, and the City of Milton. And whereas Building Safety Month, code officials keep you safe. The theme for Building Safety Month 2013 encourages all Americans to raise awareness of the importance of building safety, green and resilient building, pool, spa, and hot tub safety, backyard safety, and new technologies in the construction industry. Building Safety Month 2013 encourages appropriate steps everyone can take to ensure the places where we live, learn, work, worship, and play are safe and sustainable, and recognizes that countless lives have been saved due to the implementation of safety codes by local and state agencies. And whereas each year in observance of Building Safety Month, Americans are asked to consider projects to improve building safety and sustainability at home and in the community, and to acknowledge the essential service provided to all of us by local and state building departments and federal agencies in protecting our lives and property. Now therefore, we, the Mayor and the City Council of the City of Milton, Georgia, hereby dedicate and proclaim the month of May as Building Safety Month in the City of Milton, and call this observance to the attention of all of our citizens. Given under my hand and seal of the City of Milton, Georgia, on the 22nd day of April 2013. And I'd like to ask our Chief Building Official, Mr. Wade Green, to step forward to accept this, and also ask the council to join me. You know what, I always sing the praises of our public safety and personnel and the stuff they do to keep us safe, but these guys have got a really tough job, and they're just as important. I know from the construction side, sometimes it's, we have to work with building officials and all that, but they're doing a good job to keep us all safe, and I know it's tough sometimes, but we certainly appreciate what you're doing, and it makes a difference in keeping everybody safe. So thank you very much. Okay, the next item on our agenda is an update on the State Route 372, Crabapple Road, Birmingham Highway intersection improvement in the downtown Crabapple area. And I'll turn that over to Mr. Carter Lucas.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to give you a quick update on where we are with the Crabapple Northwest Connector project. This project has a couple of different components and is one of our federally funded HPP projects to deal with congestion within the Crabapple area. It started with some evaluation of improvements at the main intersection in Crabapple at 372 in Mayfield, and because of some historical buildings in the area and some limitations on what we could do in that particular location, grew into a connector road along the northwest side of that intersection. We've been working with the primary landowners in the area to come up with a final alignment, and we have done that, and was just going to come back tonight to show you what the final alignment looks like as well as current schedule. So the project has a couple of different components. In addition to the intersection improvements at Mayfield and Broadwell and 372, which will include left turn lanes on the 3 approaches where we have room, we're going to do a couple of different things on the connector road. So as you come into the Crabapple area at right where the Korean church is now, Crabapple Chase subdivision, which is Alpharetta, we'll have a roundabout installed there. The roundabout will really kind of establish the downtown Crabapple area and kind of bracket that end, hopefully provide some traffic calming as you come into the downtown Crabapple area. And then it'll follow pretty much the existing alignment of the roads that are back in the subdivision that has not been platted yet, part of Crabapple Crossroads, and then come out at the existing McFarland entrance to 372 where the John Whelan property is. And that location will have another roundabout to facilitate movements from this connector road onto 372. So we've been working pretty closely with the majority landowners along this alignment to come up with an alignment and a layout that we think is going to be beneficial to all those parties that are involved in this project. So as we work through these projects, just to kind of give you an idea, I don't really expect you to be able to read these slides other than to recognize the flow chart that as we get to the end of the project and start looking at schedule, will help you understand a little bit about why the schedule is as long as it is. But when we look at the standard GDOT project, we've got a conceptual approval plan process that we go through. We have a preliminary plan process that we go through, and then we have a final plan process that we go through. And at this point, we've gotten through the conceptual plan. We have our conceptual plan approval from GDOT and essentially are in the preliminary plan stage. And so we're at a couple of different locations, a couple of processes going on concurrently, the design process as well as the environmental process. And so we are moving towards what we refer to as preliminary final plan review and hope to have that in May. So if you look at the overall schedule, and you can see why it draws out so far. Currently, we've got our conceptual approval that we had. We're working toward environmental approval that we hope to have in preliminarily in May and then final in August. And our preliminary plans will be done in May. The important part about that preliminary approval from GDOT on the environmental side is that it's going to allow us to go to early acquisition on some of the right-of-ways. So while we haven't necessarily finished the entire environmental approval, we've gotten it to a point where they will permit us to begin early acquisition on the right-of-ways in the cases where we've got final plats that have been submitted so that we don't get homes and things built along the alignment that we would have to deal with later. So those are 2 key milestones that we'll be reaching here relatively quickly. We're looking to complete the right-of-way process in August of 2014. Final plans after that with construction beginning in April 2015 and finally open to traffic in June of 2016. Now most of this is driven by right-of-way acquisition. There's quite a long time in there for right-of-way. We're hoping to be able to accelerate that, and we're hoping that by including the major stakeholders in the process that we'll be able to accelerate the right-of-way acquisition piece of it. Right now we're looking at approximately 24 parcels that would be impacted with the right-of-way. If you looked at the other projects that we just completed on 372 and 140, the right-of-way process on that, was about the same number of parcels, and we did the right-of-way in about 9 months on that one. So hopefully that's an area that we can accelerate and pick up some time in the overall schedule. But I just wanted to bring it forward to you tonight to give you an update on where we were with this project, and if you had any comments or concerns with it, to give you an opportunity to voice that. With that, I'll answer any questions that you may have, if any.
Bill?
What's the funding program for this project?
Well, that comes out of our high priority projects, our HPP funds. It's an 80-20 split, 80% federal, 20% local. Right now, we're estimating probably in the neighborhood of $4.5 to $5 million in the overall project, of which about $1 million would be locally funded. I guess one of the good things about the drawn-out schedule is it does allow us to accumulate funds and save up for the project and be able to fund those components of it as they come up. So.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Carter? Karen?
Is the plan going to be available online? Because I know it wasn't part of our actual agenda, so is it going to be available so that we can actually look at it in detail along with the schedule and everything?
It is. We'll be updating the schedule here shortly as soon as we get through preliminary plans, as all of our intersection projects are. www.miltonintersectionprojects.com offers everyone an opportunity to view the latest plans, schedules, where we are with all of our intersection projects throughout town.
So it will be on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Matt?
And explain as well, obviously this is the Crabapple area, so a lot of people have an affinity for the feel of that community, and looking at where we're putting this road, how close it is to proximity to some of those homes, and type of traffic flow, and of course the variation of the different business owners. What are we doing in order to ensure that the road is going to be within the schematics of that feel of Crabapple as we're going through that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a balance between the land use and the requirements that we're going to be held to by the state. One of the things that we're doing is, as we move through this project, we're looking at land use plans in conjunction with the road. And so Bob Buscemi, our city architect, is working through some land use plans in this area to try and incorporate the road and the typical section as best we can into those overall land use plans. One of the things, because of the lengths of the project, I would be a little bit reluctant to have those things go first and then come in. Then we'd be looking at a road out here 2018, 2020. And so we're trying to do these two things in conjunction, and where we can adjust the plan based on the land use plan and the comments from Mr. Buscemi, we'll try and do that. And I think we've got time to do that in our process.
Bert?
What's the involvement with the DOT? Is it just with where the roundabouts are, and it's going to be a local type street in between, or is it going to become an alternate to 372, or what's the?
Well, from an overall project standpoint, the way these run is we take the projects through design and right-of-way acquisition. Then they are turned over to GDOT for construction. So even though we just have the two roundabouts on the actual state route, the connector road between the two roundabouts will be part of the overall project, as well as the turn lanes at the intersection, and will be constructed by GDOT. At the end of the construction period, it'll be turned back over to the city, and that connector piece will be a local road.
Okay, yeah, Lance?
Funding from the, federal side with everything going on, sequester and all that, the budgeted funds are already budgeted.
They are. Should not be affected by that.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? No? Thank you for update us, Carter. For most of us, intersection improvements and things like that are exciting. As you guys can see from the schedule, it takes a long time, and most of us here are fortunate that have been here for a while on City Council to finally see some of these improvements moving forward that we've been working on for several years. So it
Finally.
takes a long time. It's a little different than the private world when you decide you want to do something and you figure out how to pay for it and then you just do it. Obviously, we're spending public money, and I've got private individuals' land and lots of safety, and so it takes a long time. Got to make sure it's done right. So, thank you, Carter.
Thank you.
Next, I'll ask Adam Fraley to give us our presentation on the City of Milton fiscal year 2012 annual audit.
What's that? For the agenda up there? Draw a point.
That's not it.
Annual audit agenda? Is that what you have?
That's not it.
That's not it.
That's not it.
Try the PDF. Sudie gave it to you.
You were not perfect all the time either. Figure it out. Just get us a presentation, some kind of presentation. Anything.
Good audit.
A good audit.
Do they have it on your screens?
I've got
They
it.
have them, they have their iPads.
Right.
Yeah, we've got,
Got it.
You can go ahead and get
If you want to look on there, I'll present from a hard copy I have here. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to present the audit for the City of Milton for the year ended September 30th, 2012. I'm Adam Fraley. I was the partner in charge of the audit engagement. And you should have on your packets there, you should have the city's comprehensive annual financial report for the year ended September 30th, and then also what we call our annual audit agenda. I'm going to pretty much stick to the audit agenda, summarizes the results of the audit, some of our required communications, and so forth. So if you want to follow along there, and please stop me if you've got questions. Starting off, page 2 there of the audit agenda gives some information about Milton & Jenkins. For those of you that may not be familiar, history of our firm, history and information about our governmental practice of our firm, as well as the engagement team leaders led by myself down there as the engagement lead partner. On page 3, you'll see a little more information about the firm, about the different industries that we serve, different services that we provide. And on page 4, kind of the bottom line results of the audit. The financial statements are the city's responsibility. The finance department obviously accounts for the accounting transactions throughout the year and puts together a good-looking set of financial statements that we have a responsibility to audit and provide an opinion on those financial statements on whether they're fairly presented in all material respects. We did so, and we issued a clean opinion, which is an unqualified opinion. Again, meaning that those financial statements as of them for the year ended September 30th, 2012 were fairly presented. On page 5 there, you'll see that, again, this year, the city elected to report using a comprehensive annual financial report, which is above and beyond what's required by state of Georgia law. It has additional sections, including an introductory section, and also a statistical section that you'll see there, which provides a lot of good historical information and on the city since its inception, and that'll build to 10 years to provide all that history of information for readers to be able to see a year-to-year analysis. On page 6 there, it talks a little bit about the award that you get for doing a CAFR. The city, since its inception, has prepared a CAFR. They have submitted the CAFR to the GFOA, which is a national association that will provide rewards for excellence in financial reporting. The city has been successful in getting that award each year, and I know this year is planning to submit that again, or has submitted that again to GFOA to accomplish and get that award. It's something, and I always like to pause here because it's something that cities, most cities in Georgia do not do. Most cities nationally do not do. It is really above and beyond the requirements and of state of Georgia and requirements nationally, really. And the city's finance department really deserves a pat on the back there for providing such a well put together document. On page 7 there, speaking of pats on the back, this is an area where I definitely should not get a pat on the back. You'll see there I add a little typo in my proofing, mentioning the Johns Creek Convention and Visitors Bureau. So if y'all will forgive me there, that was inadvertently left in. But it defines the difference between government-wide financial statements and fund financial statements. Fund financial statements are like your general fund, your different special revenue funds or debt service funds. The government-wide financial statements are kind of a compiling of all of the fund information, but also reports on long-term things like capital assets and long-term debt. So that's a little bit of the difference there. The next couple pages talks a little bit about the fund level and mainly the general fund being the main operating fund of the city. You'll see a couple graphs on page 8 there breaking down the different fund revenue sources, general fund revenue sources, and of course the majority of revenues coming from taxes as well as license permits, charge for services, fines, and forfeitures, and then some other miscellaneous revenues. On the expenditure side, you'll see down there that the most notable areas are public safety at 51%, general government at 21%, and public works at 11%. On the two, between revenues and expenditures, you'll also see that general fund revenues went down slightly during 2012, and expenditures went up slightly during 2012. You'll see some brief explanations there of some of those reasons. On page 9 shows a little bit of the comparison between revenues and expenditures, and you'll see there that each year, including 2012, revenues are above expenditures, meaning that the city has successfully added reserves to its fund balance each year. On page 10, this is a little bit about the government-wide, in other words, the city as a whole. On the city's statement of net assets, which is its balance sheet, if you will, you'll see that its net assets position, which is its equity, increased from about $57 million to $61.8 million during 2012. Most of that is of course, in investment in capital assets net of any related debt of about $42.5 million, leaving unrestricted net assets of about $18 million, what's considered available for those future operations. Next couple pages is kind of a Cliff Notes version of the footnotes as you look through the CAFR and want to know what some of these footnotes are really meaning. This is kind of tries to tell you a little bit about what each one of those footnotes are trying to tell a reader. It takes me to page 13. Page 13 and the next few pages goes through our required communications. I'm not going to go into detail on each one of these. These are under the standards, what we're required to report to you, and if we had any things in there, for example, significant difficulties encountered during the audit or any disagreements with management about any audit adjustments, etc. We didn't have any difficulties in performance of the audit or disagreements with management. Again, this year they were completely cooperative and very helpful in making sure the audit went smoothly. Flipping a couple pages there. On page 16, it goes into some of our recommendations. We did have one finding of an accounting nature where the accounting records needed to be corrected for reporting of capital assets. And we did have one what we consider a management point, which is a smaller management recommendation, not being required by the standards to be reported, but something we always like to make aware to management and maybe streamline some internal control processes. And on page 17, and it goes, unfortunately, this section grows and grows every year, but it's the new standards coming out. So it's a lot of good fun reading if any of y'all want to brush up on that. But it's a whole slew of standards coming out. Again, it's kind of growing each year, and they're coming out fast and furious. But these are things that we always want to just keep management, keep councils abreast of the different standards that are coming down the pipeline and how those may affect the decisions made that'll have accounting transaction implications. But that goes on for several pages. And then in the back, it mentions our free quarterly CPE, and this is something we've been doing for a little while now. And I know the city's taking advantage of it in the future, and please continue to do so. And if you know of any folks that, you want to add to that, please, we'd love to have them. That's all I've got, if you've got any questions.
Any questions for Adam? Yeah, Karen? Any questions? That's good. You did a good job. So, well, thank you, Adam, and also obviously want to pat on the back for our staff too, and under Stacy's direction and Chris for doing a great job. So, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. We don't have any first presentations, so I'm going to move into our first public hearing, which is the consideration of an ordinance to adopt amendments to the fiscal 2013 budget for each fund of the City of Milton, Georgia, amending the amounts shown in each budget as expenditures, amending the several items of revenue anticipations. I'm not saying that right, but anticipations. It's what we anticipate to get. Prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. And I'll turn that over to Stacy Inglis.
Well, thank you. We have a presentation for you tonight. It's a little bit easier to talk about something when it's more visual. As far as mid-year budget amendments go, let me get the clicker.
While she's doing that, before she gets started, Council, just for the record, I'll say that this is agenda item 13088, so we've got that captured, and there will be no vote at the end of this. This is the public hearing.
Okay, what you see before you is kind of talking about where we are with the approved budget and requested amendments and budget with the amendments. And so what was approved was the little over $18.3 million in revenues and $20.4 million in expenditures for fiscal year 2013. The difference we anticipated coming out of fund balance. Our fund balance at the beginning of the year was $10.1 million, and at the end of the year, with the current approved budget, it would be a little over $8 million. The requested amendments are $393,416 to revenues, adding to revenues, and then expenditures, $1,276,282. That's also adding to expenditures. The difference between the two is $882,866. That amount is going to be coming out of fund balance. So the ending fund balance, if the budget amendments are approved, would be a little over $7.1 million. This has changed from what was presented to you back at the work session based on a meeting that we had with Councilmember Longoria a couple of hours ago. And we'll get to that in just a moment. Either way. Okay, fund balance, again, beginning fund balance is $10.1 million. Approved at the adoption of the budget is taking out $2 million. An additional amount is being taken out for the radio system. We talked about this at the work session. The radio system costs are currently, well, before Johns Creek decided not to participate, it was $1.9 million. Our share was $1.9 million. Since they decided not to participate, our share went up to $2.4 million. We are currently funding $1.65 million with the approved what am I trying to say? With the approved budget amendments.
I know how you feel.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. You're rubbing off on me, Joe. So half of that, $750,000 is left to be funded in fiscal year 2014. A portion of the architectural cost for the public safety building will also be taken out of fund balance. So again, ending fund balance will be $7.1 million at the end of this fiscal year. Revenue amendment highlights, just kind of touch on these briefly. Property taxes, we're recommending an increase in that budget of $285,000, and that is based on the trending that we've had from the past 2 years especially. We budgeted very conservatively with an 83% collection rate for fiscal year 2013, but based on the collection rate for the last 2 fiscal years, we're seeing about a 96% collection rate. And so we're proposing to increase property tax budget appropriations by getting it up to 94% collection rate. So that'll get us to the $285,000. Franchise fees, we're recommending that. Oh, I had that wrong. I think that one's only supposed to go up to $100,000. I'm sorry, that's wrong. It's on the presentation. It's only supposed to be $100,000 increase to franchise fees. Building permits, we're increasing that by $100,000, and again, that's based on trending currently. Court admin fee, we're decreasing by $50,000 based on trending, and fines and forfeitures, we're decreasing that by $100,000. The next slide kind of gives you a little idea about what we're looking at for fines and forfeitures. And you can see over the past 4 years, it has just steadily decreased. Personnel moves, the finance director, me, now the assistant city manager. We have a firefighter that moved to an EMT trainer. We had a records clerk that moved from the city clerk's department into the human resources department. And the community builder position is no longer funded by Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities mini grant program. Some additional personnel moves. The screen is a lot to take in, but let's kind of go over this a little bit. What we previously did before the human resources manager resigned was she was responsible for employee training and employee benefits for the most part. I mean, she obviously did other things, but she was considered one full-time equivalent. We had a disbursement coordinator who did payroll, processed AP checks, and handled customer service at the front counter. She was one full-time person. And then we had a special events coordinator who was in charge of special events. She was at 0.75% of, she was part-time. So with the human resources manager resigning, we were able to kind of rethink how we structure things and kind of move some people around into some different positions, spread out some of the responsibilities. So you can see part of the responsibilities that the human resources manager used to do was split between the special events manager, now currently a full-time position, and the administrative services manager. The administrative services manager also does payroll, and she's also been given some other finance duties to kind of help relieve some of the responsibilities that I had in finance. And then we have a revenue clerk, a part-time revenue clerk. So in all, we were actually able to decrease it by 0.25 full-time equivalent person. There's a cost savings of $14,000 associated with the personnel moves that we're able to do. Any questions on that slide? Okay. Expenditure amendment highlights. To manage our future risk, we are proposing to increase the defined benefit funding from 5.31% to 9% per employee. The remaining cost for this fiscal year is $114,000, and I'll talk a little bit more on that in just a moment. Because we always get better numbers in mid-year, we're decreasing the group insurance appropriations by $65,000, and that's more in line with actuals. And the wish we didn't have to is cleanup of Adams property of $75,000, and I'll show you some pictures of what it looks like right now.
That was my humor, not Stacy's.
He tweaked my presentation. And our staffing calls for it. The firefighter position that was promoted to the EMS trainer, we're proposing to backfill that position. The cost for that is $24,300 for the remainder of this fiscal year. And then after the meeting we have with Councilmember Longoria this afternoon, we've come to the conclusion that it would be better to have an IT consultant instead of a full-time IT person, software engineer on staff. The cost is not to exceed $20,000. And to talk about the defined benefit, you can see on the chart there the proposed cost from the actuary is in blue. So it starts out at the 5.31% and it goes up to 9%. In 2021, I can't see that from here, but I think that's when the year is, and it would level out at that point. We are proposing to pre-fund the defined benefit starting at 9% now, The goal is to, like, again, to level out the funding to avoid future fluctuations. The anticipation is that funding could possibly decrease in future years because if you advance fund it now, it would likely become so well funded that we could look at decreasing it in future years. We didn't quite want to show that on the chart because we didn't know when that would happen, and we also didn't want to make any promises right now, but that is the anticipation. And then there's a new GASB reporting requirement that's coming up that we will have to start showing the funding for the defined benefit plan on the financial statements, and that can affect a few things. Of course, it'll affect the stability of our financial records, the financial stability of the city. That's what I'm trying to say, and it will also affect the rating that we have from the credit rating agencies. So some things to think about. And this also, pre-funding it now, will also create a safe position as we evaluate the plan further. Going forward.
Hey, Stacy, real quick, if you could flip back. I've never seen this graph before, and it makes it look like we're behind the curve. It makes it look like the area between the blue line and the red line are things that we're not contributing that we should be contributing. So I just want to make sure that's not the case.
No, sir, that's not the
Right.
case.
Okay. Because it just set off an alarm bell in my head when I saw it that way. I just either hadn't been paying attention or just didn't look at it that way before.
No, the blue line, again, is what the actuary is recommending that we fund it at, and we're recommending, or go ahead and pre-funding it at the 9%, so at the higher level.
Okay, all right.
Everything above the blue line is bonus.
Yeah.
According
all
to
right.
the actuary that manages our
I don't know why, it just looks different when I see it that way, so I just want to make sure.
Okay. And then this is the Adams property. It's an aerial view of the Adams property. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see there's trails all throughout the property. The house itself, part of the roof is off of the house itself. There's lots of debris, and this next slide is going to show you a little closer look at some of the debris. These are pictures that were taken, I believe, last week of the property, and this is just a very small portion of the pictures.
How big, anybody know how big a parcel that is?
Let's see.
5 acres.
Is the total acreage covered up?
It's big, yeah, pretty much.
Where does he get all this stuff from?
I don't know. Presumably he hauls some of it in. I've heard that he's, this is all rumor and speculation, but I've heard that he bids at auction on unknown quantities of things and collects them.
Those used mattresses?
sale.
Yeah. I don't have a really good explanation for it, other than it's a condition that exists that violates our code that we now have the authority to clean up, and we're going to have to move forward doing that. The property just changes every day, and as you can see, it it's not like we're just going out there to remove a couple of U-Hauls full of stuff. There's substantial cleanup that's going to have to happen on this property. So we're going to fund enough to get started. I hope that serves to cover it, but we'll have to come back and let you all know.
And that's funding that at some point, hopefully will be collected back.
That's right.
Through a lien or something. Okay.
That's right. Yes, we have the authority of the court to be reimbursed. Now, that is not likely to come in this fiscal year and is likely to come potentially decades in the future if and when the property changes hands. So, but again, we are empowered with the order of the court to go in and bring the property into compliance with our code.
What do you do with the stack of mattresses that have been left out in the elements?
And I think what we'll do is we'll remove them from the property. We'll likely store them or have the person that removes them, the company that removes it, store it for a period of time in which it can be claimed. It would then be, first line of disposal would be through auction, and after that would be destruction.
You want to bid on it?
When you say claimed, Chris, what do you mean claimed?
Either claimed by the owner as something of value that shouldn't have been removed to bring the property into compliance, or could be claimed and stored elsewhere. or then we would go to auction after a period of time to see what was sold through auction, and then we would dispose of the
Well,
rest.
we can't remove the stuff and then have it all claimed and move back to the property again.
Well, that's the condition, right? It can be claimed so long as it can be stored somewhere legally. So if Mr. Adams were to want to come claim his mattress and store it at the off-site storage here next to Q Barbecue, then we would be fine with that.
So we can't go in
This
there
property needs to be into compliance.
and clean it up with dumpsters and just throw it all away and be done with it.
You know, the court order, although it's powerful, it doesn't really speak to things of value. So while we have the authority to go in there and clean it up, I don't know that we have the authority to simply take what arguably could be his property and just throw it away. At a minimum, I think the court would impose a reasonableness test on us. So I think what the city manager just outlined is what we've come up with. We need to have some interim period where there can be a opportunity to retrieve it, so long as there is a plan to then store it lawfully.
But what about like these loads of stone? They've got value. Do we have to store those at the Public Works barn? So, if anything, it's got more value than those mattresses.
We've got a plan on a neutral storage area.
Is there any, only because the cost to move it and store it and move it and get rid of it after, is there any way to, what's on the property, give a time period where the owner has to claim and prove where he can lawfully store something? And then that way, we go in, say, 30 days later and take, I'm just asking.
We have to provide notice a couple of points along the way. We're gonna have an inspection of the premises for purposes of bidders wanting to propose to do this project, so there's gonna be an opportunity then. So the property owner's gonna know at different stages as we get closer and closer to the final removal, and if they choose to get rid of it, or dispose of it lawfully, they can do that then, but we don't have much expectation that that'll be the case.
Okay. Anybody? Bill?
To be honest with you, and I'll tell you just real honestly why I don't hold out a lot of hope that we could go make any of those kind of demands. I mean, just last week, if you remember at the work session, we were here frantically trying to figure out how to keep some trees from being taken out. And we went and issued a stop work order because there was no grading permit that was issued on this property. And we affixed one of those stop work orders to the backhoe itself that was being used to remove the trees. And the very next morning, we went back out there, and that backhoe was being used to remove more trees with the stop work order still attached to it. So, to paint a picture of what kind of response we get, we're usually not welcome on the property. That's, I think, the presentation we have for the purposes of the public hearing. We're happy to take questions now. I've checked with Robin. There are no public comments for the public hearing. So if you want to ask questions now, probably officially, though, we should take action on the public hearing.
Okay. Is there any other questions? Then Karen.
It looks to me like we're taking $3 million out of our fund balance, going from 10.1 to 7.1. Is that correct?
Let me get there. Yes.
Of that $3 million, is all of that for capital type improvement projects? So none of that is for ongoing recurring costs that would cause us to have to take money from the fund balance in future years?
No.
So really, these are additional capital projects we have chosen to fund out of our fund balance because our fund balance is in excess of what it needs to be.
Correct.
I think you're getting confused with the county.
To highlight that even further, Councilmember, what we're trying to do is when we had the opportunity with a fairly extensively built fund balance that frankly was verging on the size that it needed to be spent on a capital project, we elected to fund as much of the public safety radio system as we could in this first year. That just frees us up next year. If we fund $1.6 million out of it this year and only have to fund $750,000 of it next year, our revenues aren't going to change much year over year unless they potentially get larger because of our success with our sales tax renegotiation. So if we can lighten the load on the public safety radio system and potentially recognize some additional revenues, that opens us up for additional type projects to look at in the next year. And I know you all have some interest in maybe doing some work in the park. So I'm trying my best to get funded what we can get funded in this year. We really didn't enter this fiscal year thinking that we could have funded $1.6 million of the radio system. At the very best, we were hoping that we funded it $1 million 2 years in a row. So this is a good step.
Well, I just want to make sure, because when it looks like you're reducing your fund balance by 30%, I want to make sure people realize we're doing that intentionally, and we're doing it to fund additional capital improvements, not operating costs that would require us to have to do it in the future.
That's right. It's very much by design. And as a side note, this morning was the first time we experienced a public safety radio outage for longer than just a quick 30 seconds. They were out this morning for almost 6 hours. So time is of the essence in moving forward with that radio system.
Yeah, and I would agree with that too. I mean, the priority is right, safety first and then everything else on top of that. So I agree with what you're doing on that.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, I'll close the public hearing.
Great.
Okay.
Mayor, we'll move on. The next one is alcohol beverage license application. Is consideration of the approval of the issuance of an alcohol beverage license to Alpharetta Athletic Club Manager, LLC, DBA Alpharetta Athletic Club, located at 3430 Highway 9, Milton, Georgia, 30004. The applicant is Bruce Gerlander. Consumption of premises wine, malt beverages, and distilled spirits. Agenda item number 13102. Stacy will take this one over, but for the record, I'd like to say that this is now the Alpharetta Athletic Club in Milton, Georgia. I think it should be the Milton Athletic Club.
I said that about 5 years ago. I said that about 5 years ago.
This is simply an owner change. When there is a change in ownership, the new owner has to come and apply for the alcohol license as though they've never had an alcohol license before. So this kind of goes along with the next agenda item. There are 2 locations for the Alpharetta Athletic Club, and this is just one of them. So they have followed all of the requirements.
And they're both in Milton?
And they're both in Milton. Yes. They have followed all of the requirements in our ordinances, and staff, we recommend that you approve the order.
Okay. Is there any questions on this, ma'am?
If they didn't change their name, would they have to reapply?
We could not right now.
Well, yeah, we'll give them a discount. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve agenda item 13102.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Hewitt, second by Councilmember Large for approval of agenda item number 13-102. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous approval. Okay.
Moving on, the next is consideration of the approval of for the issuance of an alcohol beverage license to Alpharetta Athletic Club Manager, LLC, DBA Alpharetta Athletic Club, located at 1785 Dinsmore Road, Milton, Georgia, 30004. The applicant is Bruce Gerlander. Consumption on premises wine, malt beverages, and distilled spirits. Agenda item 13103.
Does it help if I say ditto? Again, new owner, a different location. And they've followed all the requirements of our ordinances, and we recommend approval.
Okay.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve agenda item number 13-103.
Second motion.
We have a motion by Councilmember Thurman, second by Councilmember Love. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimous. Okay, we're going to move on to our zoning agenda, and per our agenda change, we're going to hear item number 3 first.
Do you mind? I do have a copy for the public's benefit here. The mayor and I are kind of working without a script tonight because our clerk is not here tonight. Can I read? I've got the rules for the zoning agenda. If I read that real quick, and then we'll move into number 3. At the second regularly scheduled meeting of the month, the mayor and city council consider a zoning agenda. These items include rezoning petitions, modifications of zoning, use permits, and associated concurrent variances, in addition to ordinances, resolutions, and text amendments. I'd like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks, provided time remains within the allotted time. The city clerk will be keeping track of time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in the order that the speaker cards were received by the city clerk prior to the beginning of tonight's meeting. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their presentation. The Planning Commission has heard the rezoning agenda items, and recommendations have been forwarded to the Mayor and City Council for consideration and disposition. The applicant shall not submit material to the council during this meeting unless requested to do so. All material that you wish to be reviewed by the council and consideration of your application should be submitted to the Community Development Department to be included in the normal distribution of packages to the council. When an opponent of a rezoning action is made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official or the local government which will consider the application shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. Violation of relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you've contributed $250 or more to a council member and you've not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, City Attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak for your point of view. Okay. Those are the rules. So now moving forward, as the Mayor said, moved by motion and vote is consideration of T1301, AT&T and American Towers, LLC, and AT&T Mobility Corporation, 14295 Birmingham Highway, Ellen Smith, for a new 140-foot tall, 145-foot, including screening tree branches and related antennas and equipment wireless telecommunications facility designed as a tree. Agenda item number 13-090, first presentation at the April 8, 2013 regular City Council meeting. Kathy Field is listed here as the presenter. I can state, I guess, Mayor, for the record, that Ms. Smith is here. AT&T and American Towers, with respect to this zoning item, is requesting withdrawal. If you want a staff report, we're happy to give it. If you'd like to hear from Ms. Smith, who's in the audience, you can hear from her officially as well.
Okay. Is there would anybody in the council like any more information or questions from Ms. Smith? If not, then we'll open this up for a motion. You know what? Is there any public comment on that?
No.
Okay. Right. I'll open up for a motion.
Mayor, make a motion to approve the withdrawal of T13-01, AT&T and American Towers, LLC, and AT&T Mobility Corporation, 14295 Birmingham Highway, Ellen Smith, for a new 140-foot tall, it's 145-foot, including screening tree branches, and related antennas and equipment, wireless telecommunications facility designed as a tree. Agenda item number 13-090.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion for approval of the withdrawal. Councilmember Luss, second by Councilmember Coons. Is there any discussion? I just want to add one thing before we vote. I want to thank Ms. Smith and AT&T for working with both the city and the citizens for their concerns and looking for viable alternatives. So thank you very much. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Okay. We'll go back to item number 1 on our zoning agenda.
Consideration of RZ 13-03 to delete Article 7, Division 5A Deerfield Plan of the Highway 9 Overlay District and concurrently adopt a new Article 20 Deerfield Highway 9 Form-Based Code. This is agenda item number 13060. First presentation at March 4th, regular council meeting, discussed at the March 11th, 2013 council work session. Mayor and Council, this is the same item that was brought forward last month. The only thing it lacked when it was presented before was the opportunity for a public hearing, so we felt in an abundance of caution we should bring it forward again, simply so that that component of adopting something in the zoning code was adhered to. So however much of a presentation you want tonight is totally up to you. You've all voted on this at one point and thought you adopted it. This is more procedural than anything else, so I'll let you drive how much of that you want. You may just want to hold a public hearing and then vote.
Okay. First, is there any questions?
There have been no changes since last time.
Let me just make one comment toward that. Since the last time, we did use that opportunity to re-review the ordinance, and we did find some minor revisions, none of which are substantive, just cleanup items. And so you will see changes in red. They are just a cleanup. We thought we would put the time to good use to do that. So we feel that we have a even a better version, but nothing, no changes that are substantive.
Okay, is there any questions for staff other than that, or you just want to take a minute? While do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
Okay. We'll go ahead and close the hearing then, and if there is any questions or. If not, I'll open up for motion.
I'll make a motion to approve agenda item 13060.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion for approval from Councilmember Hewitt, second from Councilmember Large. Do I have any discussion, or let's see, still downloading, but, okay, no discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, we'll go to item number 2 on our agenda.
Item number 2 is consideration of U13-01 VC 13-02 Birmingham Highway, State Route 372 East Side, Luca Gianturco for a use permit for 1 baseball field and an 8,800 square foot barn. Concurrent variance is also requested to delete the 75-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback adjacent to AG1 residential use property, and provide a 50-foot setback along the north and east property line, section 64-1143B. It's agenda item number 13-089, first presentation April 8th, 2013, regular council meeting. Kathy Fee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This site map shows the applicant's site on the east side of his property along Birmingham Highway. The subject site contains 4.814 acres. It's currently zoned AG1 and is a part of a larger tract of AG1 zone land. A grading permit was issued on May 29, 2012 for the subject site, and a revised grading permit on August 27, 2012 for the construction of a baseball field. The applicant is seeking a use permit for a recreational field, being a baseball field. This shows the existing zoning to the site, which is AG1. The next slide shows the future land use map. The proposed use for this area is agricultural, equestrian, and estate residential. This shows the site plan as submitted on February 5th, 2013, with the proposed ball field on the east side of the property. By way of background, as stated above, a grading permit was issued on May 29, 2012 for this site, as well as an adjoining parcel to the south. The plan proposed additional pasture paddock areas for agricultural uses, as well as a building pad for future greenhouses. All of these uses are permitted under the AG1 zone property. However, after the issuance of the grading permit, a revision to the grading permit was made on August 27, 2012 to substitute a baseball field for the paddock on the eastern portion of the site. At that time, the Community Development's plan review staff was informed that the baseball field would be for personal use of the property owner. This limited use of the baseball field would not require any additional zoning actions. After the revision to the grading permit was approved by the Community Development Department, after the revision to the grading permit was approved, the Community Development Department was informed that the proposed baseball field would be utilized by players other than the owner and his family. Staff then informed the applicant that a use permit for recreational fields would be required to allow the use of the field by others other than his personal use. The Planning Commission did review this application at their March 26, 2013 meeting, and they recommended approval conditional of U13-01 and VC 13-02 with the following conditions. A, that evidence be provided that all adjacent landowners have no opposition to the deletion of the buffer and replace with a 50-foot setback as proposed, and that the agreed-upon landscape plan with Mr. Bates be spread on the record shown as Exhibit A. B, at the time the building is constructed, restroom facilities be constructed at that time. and C, that hours of operation are limited to daylight hours. And this is the plan, the landscape plan with Mr. Bates, who is an adjoining landowner, and it's shown on this site plan, the agreement for additional buffer between Mr. Bates and the applicant. Site plan analysis. Based on the applicant's site plan submitted to the Community Development Department on February 5th, 2013, staff offers the following considerations. Under use permit standards, under Section 64-1828 recreational fields, in all districts, and not limited to soccer, softball, baseball, polo, football, etc., a use permit is required. So regardless of which district, commercial, agricultural, whatever, for a recreational field, a use permit is required. In terms of standards, our analysis of the standards and of the use permit vis-a-vis what the applicant is calling for, we see that under number 1, permitted curb cut access shall not be from a local street. The applicant is in compliance. Birmingham Highway is a major arterial. 2, a minimum 50-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback shall be provided adjacent to residential districts or AG1 districts used for single-family dwellings. It should be noted, however, that this 50-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback is obviated by the Northwest Fulton Overlay District development. They have a much more stringent standard in that they require a 70-foot undisturbed buffer and a 10-foot improvement setback. So hence, the applicant is asking for a variance so as to not have to follow the Fulton County overlay, but just to follow the basic 50-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback. And that's the genesis of his variance request, okay? Number 3, loudspeakers, paging systems are prohibited adjacent to residentially used property. The applicant is in compliance. The applicant has indicated in the letter of intent that there shall be no loudspeakers or paging systems. 4, the hours of operation shall be limited to daylight hours when said facility is located adjacent to residential districts and AG1 districts used for single-family dwellings. The applicant is in compliance. The applicant has indicated in the letter of intent there shall be no outside lighting on the site. So, as I mentioned, the Northwest Fulton Overlay District requirements, the variance is to delete the 70-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback adjacent to AG1 residential use property and provide instead that 50-foot setback along the north and east property lines. Section 64-1141, subsection 3B of the Northwest Fulton Overlay District requires a 75-foot undisturbed buffer with a 10-foot improvement setback located adjacent to all AG1 agricultural zoning districts and all properties zoned, used, or developed for residential uses. Staff notes that although the south property line is not mentioned, even though the adjacent property is owned by the applicant, a concurrent variance will also be needed for the south property line. The city arborist has offered the following in his comments. Area for the use permit initially had nearly 100% coverage of mixed vegetation consisting of pines and hardwoods. Said area has been nearly completely denuded under previous permits, indicating pasture and personal recreation field and additional greenhouses. It appears that if the applicant had indicated that the baseball field would be used for others and a use permit was applied for prior to the permitting and construction of the field, at least a portion of the required buffers would be intact. In addition, the applicant has not provided credible evidence demonstrating compliance with subsections 1 through 4 as follows. 1, relief if granted would not offend the spirit or intent of the zoning ordinance. 2, there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of this zoning ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship. 3, relief if granted would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. And 4, that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured and that substantial justice is done. Based on this statement, staff recommends denial of VC 13-02 along the north, east, and south property lines. Building heights, size, height, and other structural design. The site plan proposed an 8,000 square foot storage/practice building built to look like a barn. Staff notes that the building must comply with all Northwest Fulton overlay standards and must be submitted to the City of Milton Design Review Board prior to the issuance of a building permit from the Community Development Department. The applicant does not state the height of the proposed building, but that the overlay district states there shall be a maximum height limit of 2 stories, with the maximum height 30 feet from average finished grade to the bottom of the roof eave, pursuant to Section 65-1145-4. The site plan also indicates that the dimensions of the barn will be 80 feet by 110 feet. The overlay district requires that for every 80 feet of building length on a single face, there shall be a variation in the exterior pursuant to Section 65-1145-5. Other site plan considerations, parking requirements. Per Section 64-1410, off-street parking, a recreation field requires 50 parking spaces. In the applicant's letter of intent, it states that the parking will be provided on the adjoining parcel zone C1, community business, to the north, which is also owned by the applicant. On that parcel, there are a total of 102 gravel parking spaces and 5 handicap parking spaces. Therefore, the site plan meets the minimum required number of parking spaces. Staff notes that a handicap parking space will be required closer to the baseball field. Parking requirements continued. Staff notes that where the limits of the use permit are located along the north property line, this area does not allow for sufficient space for pedestrians to access the baseball field based on the fact there is a 50-foot undisturbed buffer along the east property line of the commercial parcel. The applicant has stated there is an alternative route for pedestrian ingress and egress from the commercial parcel to the subject site located further to the west. Restroom facilities. The site plan does not indicate any restroom facilities on the site. The building official has stated that per code, restrooms must be provided within 500 feet of the field. The applicant has stated that the participants will go to the facilities on the commercial property. This is a greater distance than what is required. Concessions, lighting, and loudspeakers. Includes the condition that there shall not be any concession stands within the proposed 8,800 square foot building or any new structures, vehicles, either permanent or temporary, on the subject site used for concessions. Based on the applicant's letter of intent, conditions will be included to prohibit outside lighting of any type as well as loudspeakers. Public involvement. On February 27, 2013, the applicant was present at the Community Zoning Information Meeting held at the Milton City Hall. There were approximately 6 members of the community in attendance. Their concerns included the intensity of the use from the public and the absence of vegetative screening adjacent to single-family residences. Public participation plan and report. The applicant has met the requirements of the public participation plan and report. There were 3 people in attendance. They had the following issues: lack of screening at the southeast corner of the field, number of people using the field, frequency of use, times of use, and stormwater runoff direction and treatment. The public participation report was submitted on March 5, 2013 by the applicant. City of Milton Design Review Board meeting March 5, 2013. Their comments included that if the field is open to the public, ADA access from the parking lot will be required. The plan should include an agreement to the applicant himself for shared parking and their use of the bathroom. Environmental site analysis. The proposed site does not contain floodplain, wetlands, steep slopes, or sensitive plant and animal species. The applicant also states that there are no streams on the subject property. However, there is a very small section of the stream buffer associated with the stream on the adjacent northern property. The baseball field will not impact this buffer. The site plan indicates compliance with the required city and state stream buffers and non-impervious setback. The proposed use will not impact any historical or archaeological entities. The city arborist. The area for use permit initially had nearly 100% coverage of mixed vegetation of pines and hardwoods. Said area has been nearly completely denuded under previous permit, indicating pasture and personal recreation field and additional greenhouses. Commercial use of the property requires 33 density units, TDUs, per acre. The requirement below will be included in the recommended conditions. That requirement says that The 4.81 acres requires 144.3 tree density units to remain on site. Planted on site, a combination or both, or in lieu of planting, the dollar amount to be determined by the city arborist may be placed in the city tree fund. Use permit considerations. In the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare, the mayor and city council may exercise limited discretion in evaluating the site proposed for a use that requires a use permit. In exercising such discretion pertaining to the subject use, the mayor and city council shall consider each of the following as outlined in section 64-1552 of the zoning ordinance under use permit considerations. Staff has reviewed said items pertaining to the subject site and offers the following comments. A, whether the proposed use is consistent with the land use or economic development plans adopted by the mayor and city council. The City of Milton's 2030 comprehensive plan recommends that the subject site be developed as agricultural, equestrian, and estate residential. The property is zoned AG1, agricultural, which is an appropriate zoning district within the character area. A use permit for a recreational field is permitted within the AG1 agricultural district. B, compatibility with land uses and zoning districts in the vicinity of the property for which the use permit is proposed. North of the subject site is zone C1 and developed with a retail nursery. Further north, east, and south is zoned AG1, developed with scattered single-family residences. To the west of the subject site is zoned AG1 with a veterinary clinic, church, and scattered single-family residences. If developed in accordance with staff's recommended conditions and the provisions of the zoning ordinance, the proposed baseball field may be compatible with land uses and zoning districts in the area. Therefore, staff recommends approval conditional of U13-01. Whether the proposed use may violate local, state, and/or federal statutes, ordinances, or regulations governing land development. The proposed use may not violate any known local, state, and/or federal statutes, ordinances, or regulations governing land development if approved with the recommended conditions. D, the effect of the proposed use on traffic flow, vehicular and pedestrian along adjoining streets. The proposed use should not create congestion along Birmingham Highway if approved based on the fact that access is derived via the commercial zoned and developed parcel to the north. E, the location number of off-street parking spaces. A baseball field requires 50 parking spaces. There are a total of 102 gravel parking spaces and 5 handicap parking spaces. Therefore, the site plan meets the minimum required number of parking spaces. Staff notes that a handicap parking space will be required closer to the baseball field. F, the amount and location of open space. The applicant's site plan indicates that almost the entire subject site within the boundary of the use permit is developed with the exception of the required understory buffers along the north, east, and south property lines. Protective screening. If developed in accordance with the requirements of the zoning ordinance, the areas replanted to buffer standards may provide adequate screening to the adjacent AG1 zoned and residentially used properties. Hours and manner of operation. The applicant has indicated in the letter of intent that the baseball field will be in use only during daylight hours. Outdoor lighting. The applicant has indicated in the letter of intent that there will be no outdoor lighting or lighting of the baseball field. A condition will be included that will reflect that there shall be no lighting of the baseball field. J, ingress and egress to the property. The applicant's site plan indicates ingress and egress will be via the parking lot of the adjoining C1 zoned and developed property, which has an existing curb cut on Birmingham Highway. Conclusion. The proposed baseball field, if developed with staff recommendations, meets the requirements and development standards of the requested use permit. The applicant has not demonstrated the need for the requested concurrent variance to reduce the 75-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback to a 50-foot setback. Therefore, staff recommends denial of VC 13-02 and approval conditional of U 13-01. Staff offers the following recommended conditions for a use permit for a baseball field and building. Recommended conditions. 1, to the owner's agreement to restrict the use of the subject property as follows. A, 1 baseball field and building at a density of 1,828 gross floor area per acre zoned, or a total of 8,800 square feet, whichever is less. To the owner's agreement to abide by the following. To the site plan received by the City of Milton Community Development Department on February 5, 2013. Said site plan is conceptual only and must meet or exceed the requirements of the zoning ordinance and these conditions prior to the approval of a land disturbance permit. unless otherwise noted herein, compliance with all conditions shall be in place prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy. To the owner's agreement to the following site development considerations. A, provide a 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback adjacent to the north, east, and south property lines. B, require 144.3 tree density units to remain on site, planted on site, a combination of both, or in lieu of planting. The dollar amount to be determined by the city arborist may be placed in the city tree fund. C, provide a recorded cross easement between the subject property and the property to the north for pedestrian access. No outside speakers permitted on the site. No outdoor lighting, including lighting for the field, permitted on the site. No concessions permitted within the proposed 8,800 square foot building or new or temporary structures or vehicles used for concessions. And lastly, comply with all required ADA, site and building requirements and other building code requirements for the baseball field and 8,800 square foot building. And then lastly, I have included in red the recommendations from the Planning Commission should this body decide to incorporate any of them. And they include the following. Provide evidence that all adjacent landowners have no opposition to the deletion of the buffer and replace with the 50-foot setback as proposed, and that the agreed-upon landscape plan with Mr. Bates be spread on the record shown as Exhibit A. H, at the time the building is constructed, restroom facilities should be constructed at that time, and that the hours of operation are limited to daylight hours. And then lastly, of course, is Mr. Bates' landscape plan, Exhibit A, which was mentioned in the Planning Commission's recommendations. And that is my presentation, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, before I open this up, public, is there any questions off the bat right now for Ms. Field?
I've got a quick question.
Bert?
On the last slide you had, the three in red, G was the one about the provide evidence from the adjacent landowners. That is if we granted the variance.
That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
And do we have you seen any of that evidence?
There's no written, but there's no written evidence, no. You'd have to ask the applicant.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, we can, we'll open it, open this up for those in favor of this application first.
The first person to speak is Mr. Scott Reese.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm Scott Reese, doing business with Brumelo Reese and Associates at 13685 Highway 9, Milton, Georgia 30004. I'm here tonight representing Mr. Luca Gianturco and his application for a special use permit to operate a baseball field. Very short history. Mr. Gianturco intended to expand his nursery business with the acquisition of the adjoining property. The intent was for AG use and the construction of a stable and riding arena for his daughters. As can sometimes happen, as his daughters aged, priorities changed. His son became very interested in baseball, so we had already started the grading process, so the attempt was to change the plan for a baseball field. We did the necessary adjustments to the site plan, submitted them to the City of Milton, obtained approval. At no time was there any attempt to deceive the City of Milton as far as the intent. I guess it's a matter of semantics. Mr. Gianturco interpreted his son's baseball team being his private use, when it was explained to him that when someone else comes onto the field that is not immediate family, it kicks in the special use permit. So it was just simply a matter of semantics. There was no attempt to deceive anyone. It is a private field with limited access. We have gone to great pains to limit the area of the special use to the smallest area that we can to preclude any expansion. It will be one field for one team. I'm trying to limit my time where Mr. Gianturco can speak. We are here to say we accept all the conditions with the deletion of number A, which we feel is a solution looking for a problem. We have letters from the neighbors saying they are happy with the 50-foot setback. Mr. Gianturco's plan is for an agricultural rural look. This area will be grassed and fenced. There will be animals grazing in the outfield. It is not his intent to create a pine tree buffer, and that the neighbors are in compliance, and we have documents to back that up. Also, letter B, as far as the tree recompense, this is not a commercial use. It will be a private field with nonprofit, I guess, aspirations. It is open fields. It's not buildings or parking lots per se. We have limited it to the very extent of just the field itself. In his ag use, he was well within his rights to have taken down every tree and created nothing but pasture. We went to great pains to locate the specimen trees and areas to maintain on his adjoining AG property. We've also saved the better trees along the property line. So his intent is to preserve the look of a farm with animals grazing in, and we just have a problem with the concept of this as a commercial use and being held to the same standards as if we were building a Walmart with the tree recompense. At this time, I'd like to close, and Mr. Gianturco would like to speak, and I'll be available to try to answer any questions. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having us. My vision out there is a place for kids.
Excuse me, Mr. Gianturco, if you don't mind, just for the record, state your name and address.
Oh, okay, Luca Gianturco. I own Scottsdale Farms at 15639 Birmingham Highway in Alpharetta. But my intent was to create a baseball field for kids to play baseball, to learn about not only baseball, but learn about life. My son's coach is here, Ryan Dunn, and his dad, Mr. Dunn, to his right. But our vision is to have a program where kids can come learn, again, not only baseball skills, but life skills, and with animals grazing in the area, sheep, some miniature cows, things like that. So I'm going to say something which I said at the last meeting. I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but I think I need to say it just for some clarity. When we got permission to build the baseball field, the question was never asked to me, what do you use the baseball field for? And we weren't trying to deceive anybody. So the plan was approved, and then I got a call from Robin during Christmas tree season saying, Luca, what do you use the field for? And I said, well, yeah, I know my son's going to play there, but we don't exactly know how the program is going to be structured. I can tell you it's not going to be just for the family because baseball is a team sport. There will be other teams playing. She said, well, then you're going to need to get a special use permit. I said, well, I didn't know that. So she said there shouldn't be any problems, but anyway, so here we are. I can tell you that I've got about $110,000 to date doing the baseball field versus not doing the baseball field. Had I known that some of these requirements were going to be imposed on me, I would have gotten the special use permit first, but that was never asked of me. So, again, I'm not trying to be critical, but it seems like that question would have been asked to me ahead of time. You got to get a special use permit before we stamp this drawing. Are there any questions?
I'll let you go. If you're through speaking, we'll cut off the time, and then we can answer the last questions in a few minutes after everybody's through speaking.
Okay.
Okay.
Is Mr. Dunn going to speak, or are you just holding reserve?
He'd be happy to speak. If you have questions about the baseball program, what he'd like to do, he'd be very happy to talk.
It's totally up to you guys. You get the 10 minutes, so you can use it as you want. You can elect to not use any more time now. We can open it up for any of those that oppose. They'll have 10 minutes, and then you can always come back and use the rest of your time then.
Okay. Sure, Ron, you want to come on up? And one other thing, I do have letters from the neighbors, Mr. Bates and Mr. Lawrence, saying they're okay with what we'd like to do there without the buffer. This is Ryan Dunn.
How you guys doing? Ryan Dunn, 1635 Redstone Close, Milton, Georgia. At an early age, I started playing baseball. Father gave me the passion. Went through, got to play a couple years with the Red Sox, represented the USA team for 3 years. Coming into the community and teaching, it's one thing I love is teaching boys how to become men. One thing my father taught me when I was young was that iron sharpens iron, men sharpens men, and that if you can build a community of guys together, that we can really feed into it, the next generation can really lead. And so with that passion, using the vehicle of baseball, because what I'm very naturally talented at, was a perfect fit as far as what we looked at. So the program that we're really looking at is really to give back to the community, to look at ways that we can bring kids in, not only teach them about baseball, but teach them about their mind, about their body. I serve on boards for obese, 501c things with obese. I do a lot of different things with schools. I just spoke to Cambridge High School last Friday to the FCA program. So I'm trying to give as much ways back to the community we can as far as what we do. My father and I started a 501c called One Thing, Group for Men's. We have 3 branches now. We currently meet at 7 o'clock in the morning at the Cabernet Restaurant. We have 80 to 100 men that show up every Friday morning. It's a great thing that we're doing. We're excited for the opportunity. I thank Luca for the opportunity to open up his property to give us an area where we can not only speak to men's life, but figure out how we now can take this to the kids in the community and truly teach them mind, body, and soul, physical fitness, the vehicle of baseball being the sport and it's fun, but what the world says and then what the Bible says and where the truth lies in that. So that's the passion and where we really like to take it. And I thank you for your consideration.
Trying to address the pedestrian access to the property. If you look on the site plan, the area in orange highlights the connectivity to the commercial property through an existing storm drain, and that way we would not violate the commercial buffer on that property. The parking, as far as a handicap space, we're not proposing any drives or parking on this special use permit. Mr. Gianturco has said that he would provide access to a golf cart as far as any special needs person needed access to the baseball field itself, but it is kind of hard to provide a parking space when we're not proposing a drive or a parking lot on the special use permit property. We're trying to limit the area, the acreage, in case there are any concerns as far as enlargement, or I guess the neighborhood had some concerns about creep as far as this growing. We have limited the area of special use to just to the field itself. So tried to address any of the questions thereof. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment for those? Okay.
No, there is not.
All right. Do we have any public comment opposed?
No, we do not.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing on that then if we don't have any more comments, and open it up to council for questions, staff or the applicant.
I guess. Sorry.
Go ahead, Bert.
Just a quick question as regards the, and I guess it's to staff, and I don't see Ken here right now, but to the handicap parking, as far as having that there, how do we fit into the ADA compliance and all that? Is having the spaces at the nursery sufficient for that? So
my understanding is it's not, and we, because it's a federal law, we're not allowed to waive it.
Yeah.
But so he will have to meet the ADA standards, and we will certainly try to work with him. But there are standards, requirements as part of that law that he'll have to meet.
And is that? I know there's a building on there too. Is that at the time the building and the building permit, or would it be immediately just if there's just a baseball field?
I mean, talking to the building official, he pointed out that it would, even if without the building, there would have to be meet the ADA requirements for just the accessibility to the baseball field. So,
And I guess the question is, that's really not a call that we make, or?
That's correct. That's correct. That will be as part of the review of the building plans. He will have to meet ADA, just like the size of the bathrooms and whatever, have to be incorporated in those plans. So we will pick that up as we review the site and the building plans.
So that's really not a question that the council is here to answer, or?
Yeah, there's nothing you can do to waive it. It is what it is. So,
Matt?
I got a couple of things. You said you do have letters from the homeowners, because I was here when the very first homeowner was very adamant. He was upset that the trees were cleared and he wanted to put something there in that southeast corner. And,
Right.
And I don't remember which homeowner that was, but if he has a letter, I would love to see it, because I just saw the opposite.
That was Mr. Bateman.
Right.
I think where it's listed as Bates on everything else, but it is Bateman. And we met with him. Luca designed a planning area, and that is the Exhibit A.
Okay.
And Mr. Bateman has initialed or signed his okay. I think Robin has spoke with him also, and he has given his verbal assent, but we also have a signed letter from that. And then Mr. Lawrence, who owns, I guess, the other 99% of the adjoining property that Mr. Gianturco does not own, we also have a letter from him.
Okay.
As far as the ADA compliance, we understand that, the building itself will be. I know we've had some conversations with staff as far as we have not been able to, or been given a distance requirement from a parking space to a ball field. I mean, I don't know, like Hopewell or any other park, is there you have fields that are sometimes 300, 400, 500 feet away from the parking lot, and there's typically not a parking space adjoining every, but we understand that we will have to be ADA compliant, but, we're still in some sort of flux as far as, we understand the building, the bathrooms, everything there will be, but as far as the proximity of a parking space and trying to get a road to it is, we just have not been addressed by staff with that. And I don't really know where we're going to get that direct answer.
Well, let me clarify too. I believe that is an issue that will have to be taken up when you receive a building permit. And I'm just going to assume that, and Robin and Kathy, tell me if I'm wrong, either staff's going to find or you guys are going to have to prove what you need to do federally and with the law for ADA.
Yes.
It's not really a call that we make.
We understand.
Right now,
there's
discussing.
Proposing at this time, there is going to be a time drag between the operation of the field and the construction of the building. The building may be 1-2 years in the future. So that's where the disconnect, I guess, is. We understand that when the building is proposed, we'll go through DRB and everything. It will be permitted ADA and be ADA compliant. But we're looking at the operation of the field itself, and there will be no building permit issuance as far as that. It will be either you're accepting the field or denying the field, my understanding. So that's where my question is, I guess.
Okay, and I'd have to look to, again, staff to that as if...
let me just, a construction of a field still needs to be ADA accessible. I mean, regardless of there not being a structure there, the field itself still needs that accessibility, and that's, I think, the issue.
Okay. Matt and Bill?
Well, just a couple more things as well. I just, we're obviously going to be having baseball games going on out there, right, with multiple kids, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And how many games are we going to be having every day?
I would think, in the fall and the spring, we might have, we consider ourselves fortunate to have 5 or 6 teams. So,
For 2 or 3 games on average, depending on how this is obviously a program that you're building that you hope to be successful, right? So just to make sure I know you've done some coaching in the past, I have as well. there's some certain things on behalf of the kids that I just have to ask, because I've, coached the AYFA for a lot of years, understand that too. I mean, do you have a lightning plan when lightning comes in? What is it?
Currently not.
Okay. A medical plan for the kids. Obviously if someone gets hurt, it's a long ways to get from that field all the way down in. I just, do you have a plan for that? Do you have the supplies, materials, et cetera? Have you thought about that? It's good questions. Background checks for everybody involved. Have you thought about that? What's involved? That should be a prerequisite with what we're doing, dealing with kids. I want to make sure you're aware of you getting into that. You said it's going to be nonprofit. You hope to not charge. Is that even you run the program, run the league? We recently just did a zoo where we really determined that someone could not charge for that. I just want to make sure you're aware that if there's costs associated, that if you're not going to charge, we may have to put that in there.
Right. Well, there's going to be certain expenses related to maintaining that field and the property.
Sure.
So yeah, I would think that we would charge teams to help cover those expenses.
Which then does that then make it this is C1 then, right? Is that?
Well, the use permit allows there to be associated fees. We're not saying you can't have fees to run the program. That's not.
I just said it was
Yes.
nonprofit. I just want to make sure we know that there's going to be charges associated with that.
Even nonprofits have to
Can do
charge
that.
fees for uses. So
Exactly.
That's
We also have animals that are going to be in close proximity to kids swinging bats, and balls. And I wonder where the parents are going to sit in that situation. Just, questions to ask. Obviously we have trash receptacles as well. Is there going to be food allowed, et cetera? And if we have animals in close proximity to food, what happens in that situation? So I'm thinking more I'm not, from the neighbor standpoint, I was here where the neighbor was upset, and I understand the buffer. I'm glad that you want to plant the trees as a buffer. I think that's good being a good neighbor, but there's other things to consider with the safety of the kids in a situation that just, I'd love to see it happen, love to see it work, but I want to make sure you have these plans in place that are all real when it comes to things that can go wrong. And have you thought about that, from that standpoint of design? I look at the field, it's downslope. You don't really have a fence, but other than right around the field, you got animals walking around while parents are sitting on blankets watching games.
Oh no, there will be more fencing to keep the animals contained.
Okay.
Yeah, but the lighting plan is a good point. I was actually at our game, one of our games recently got called because of thunder and lightning.
Right.
So I realized we need to have some kind of plan for that.
And there's usually equipment that's involved as well. And if you don't mind, as well, I'd like Jim Craig. Were you back here? Where is he? Jim, would you step up here and just kind of tell the council from a safety precaution what we do at Hopefully the Baseball Association?
Yes, at the Bell Memorial Park right now, there is a state-of-the-art lightning detection system that serves not only the park, but due to the loudness of the horns, is actually serving the surrounding subdivisions as well, in which we had to formally notify them when it was being put in. It is capable of detecting the ionization in the air and is predicting the presence of lightning coming. It has proved itself to be extraordinarily effective in allowing us to get the people, children and all the adults, not only off the field and under a cover, but get them into their cars, which is their best, safest opportunity. Continuing on, all of the fields have ADA parking in close proximity and also have cut-through curbs to permit direct ambulance access if needed. So should we have an accident, we can get someone right onto the field.
You seem to have a comment real quick.
And that was just, I just want to make sure, from the kids' safety perspective, I know this is a zoning issue, but from an opportunity standpoint to speak about it, I would just like to see it be successful.
Yeah.
These are things I would like to see. Also, I'm sure you're aware of other coaches coming in, American Restored Education Program. You can get licensing for training, et cetera. If there's going to be games there, I'd love for that after the games, all the kids go shopping at Scottsdale Farms, eat there, or Birmingham Crossroads, and want to see it successful. But for the safety of kids, I just want to make sure you're thinking of that, rather than you wondering anything else as the process goes on. I'm saying it now, so
Right.
you know what I'm thinking. So,
No, and I believe in
I want to address that, and it'd really be nice if Ken was here, and those are all good points, but I want to make sure that we are not, right now, we've got a use permit for a baseball field. I don't want us to get involved with how to operate it, because then we're liable for if something happens. So obviously, those are great points, and I'm sure you will professionally make sure that you cover your bases, so to speak. But
pardon the pun.
Is that what you were coming, Joe?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna thank you guys for putting in the energy and the effort to make a program like that available for the youth in the city, because you just can't have too many of those programs, because access is everything. While some people may play other sports, some people are involved in Boy Scouts. Certainly, giving another outlet is a great thing. The question, and I would trust you guys to take care of putting together the operational procedures and rules once you guys get moving forward. I think Matt's questions are well placed, but I'm sure you guys were thinking about that anyway. The question that I would have is, since this was sort of a progressively got more maybe sophisticated, or you started changing your thoughts about what exactly was going to happen, and there is a lag you're talking about between the development of the field, the development of the buildings, that kind of stuff. What other issues do you guys have in terms of maybe roadblocks or difficulties that the city is unintentionally putting in your way to make progress?
I don't think there are any other roadblocks other than those first two items, A and B. I think,
So if we were to go ahead and vote to give you guys your use permit with the restrictions that are stated, you guys are pretty comfortable with that?
Except for
With the deletion of
Right.
B, and then.
Okay.
I'd like to have a concession stand, but if it's offensive to some people.
Well, it's funny you mention that, because I was wondering what the problem was with a concession stand.
I would guess that's probably would be the definition of a concession stand to anywhere from a snack stand to full-blown restaurant.
I think staff was looking at the intensity of the use. We just didn't want, when there's a concession stand, there tends to be more intensity of use and, more issues. So, that's up to your, what your will is for the property. And so.
It is just one ball field, and it's an awful big space, and so I just didn't know if that was a real challenge or what.
Karen?
I've got a couple questions. Number one, the concurrent variance is just to delete the 75-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback along the north and east property lines. Is a concurrent variance needed along another property line? Is that what I heard around the south?
The south property line, even though he owns it.
But why wasn't this in part of the concurrent variance of this now? Is he gonna have to come back before us again for another variance?
No, you would include it in your motion, so.
Okay, so even though we can add that to it, even though, because I didn't think we could make a change once it was advertised and add another concurrent variance.
Well, it's the same variance, we're just adjacent to his own property, so.
Where, is the city attorney here? Because I'd want to make
He's
sure.
back there with
I've
Chris.
asked him to come back in.
Okay, because I want to make sure that we're doing that. And then I know you said you really didn't want to do the tree recompense. I believe strongly in the tree recompense. I believe that, for agricultural uses is a very specific reason not to have the tree recompense, and I believe that that a tree recompense for any other use is necessary, and it's necessary for an agricultural use unless it's maintained for a certain number of years. So I believe that the tree recompense needs to be done. It looks like you've already doing some of that with the property adjacent to the Bates or Batesman's property. So some of that will be taken care of, I'm sure, with that. I don't know how many additional trees, and Mark Long may be able to tell us how many of those trees that are included on the addendum here for the property, for the adjacent to the Batesman property would take care of what percentage of the tree recompense, but I'd like that to stay in there.
Well,
Ken, if I could grab you for 1 second, just while you're gone, a couple things. We're discussing some operational safety type issues with, or practices, which were all good points, but I brought it back in that, we were actually looking at this use permit, not, trying to enforce how they run their operation or whatever. I want to make sure that's legal. We certainly, they're all perfect, they're great things, and I'm sure they fell on sound ears and will be taken, but I want to make sure that we stay on course with what we're looking at. The other thing is there's a question on ADA requirements, and I'm under the impression or thoughts that the council's really not making a decision on ADA requirements or not. That's something that legally they need to adhere to. And there's some question about whether they would need to have a parking spot there and access, or whether they could access from the other parking lot, the ADA spots there, and maybe with a golf cart or whatever. I guess my point is, I'm trying to put that, is that something that it's really, the facts are the facts on that. They're gonna have to prove to staff they are ADA compliant. If what you guys, Scott, we're talking about, that, be certain distance from the field or whatever, and you can prove that, you bring that to staff and they sign off of it. I'm assuming that's not something that we're going back and forth on here.
It's nothing that, Mr. Mayor, it's nothing that you have to go on back and forth as part of this use permit application. ADA compliance is simply something that has to be complied with, irrespective of whether the council addresses it by way of this motion.
The only reason I'm just saying, it doesn't seem that we've got a specific answer or a specific point, put on that plan.
Right.
So I'd rather them, work together with staff legally to make sure they get it done, rather than, us trying to sketch something on and say you need to do this, or you might have to, or you might not.
Well, that's true, and a good argument can be made that the flexibility of working it out with staff may make more sense. I mean, the ADA and ADA compliance is a little bit of a fluid process anyway, and so that might be something to have better as a staff negotiated point than something to the council, because once you all act, we can't have you all change it unless we go through the same process again of bringing this back, whereas they can just interact with staff and get it right.
No, and my point is, I certainly realize that being ADA compliant is very important, but that's gonna have to be between their professionals and our professionals to quantify what is ADA compliant.
Yeah, I think the council's concerned that our motion tonight is just to approve the special use permit with whatever restrictions. We're not trying to boil the ocean and define everything that's gotta be worried about moving from this point forward.
Absolutely not. That's you have capable and competent staff whose job it is to pick up this.
And I'd just like to say, it looks like, we've heard the applicants, the story and what they're trying to do and what they've done to this point, and we know from our staff reports. It looks like, to me, really the biggest contention is the buffer, both from the applicant side. Other than that, and Robin and Kathy, from what we're looking at tonight, is that the major issues?
Well, the size of the buffer, and then of course, the applicant brought up the tree recompense issue.
Right, but that's what I mean, that
And
it's
then
the trees.
The last thing is the current variance, in terms of whether we can modify it as it was advertised to include the south property line. And that was, I guess, a question.
Okay, and because the south property line is butting up to the same property owner's line.
If we're going to revise, we would have to revise all four sides, correct? He also owns on the Birmingham Highway side, so.
Well, that's not a 50-foot, it's a landscape strip. You're not abutting Birmingham Highway.
Well, what we don't, that AG property that he owns is treated differently than the AG property that he owns to the south?
That's because your use permit legal description only encompasses that 4 point whatever.
The back property there.
Okay.
Bill, do you
It
have
doesn't touch the.
One, if I might, as
Oh,
far
I'm
as
sorry,
on the.
I'm sorry, the 50-foot south, yes.
Anyway,
West.
we would like the variance to word all the property lines that need to be adjusted. One other thing, as far as the tree recompense, if it is, our preference is green space, treat it like AG. If it is the council, we would wish that it would be treated as AG property as far as the recompense, not with a commercial use. So it would be calculated from a AG standpoint as opposed to a commercial standpoint.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And look, I say, Councilmember Lusky, you have been holding your hand up for a while.
Kathy, clarify this for me then. We're talking about the setbacks from the south property line and the east property line, is that correct?
Well, the original request was for, it was the setbacks from the north and the east. And then we suggested that the south be also included as well. Now, the point has been made that maybe the west that abuts Birmingham Highway should also be included. They should also have a buffer to them.
If the size of the actual parcel that's requesting the use permit doesn't have the 75-foot ring around it, it would make sense that it would need it on all sides.
Right, right. Robin, can you,
I'm sorry, I was talking to you.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. These two don't play over top. You didn't listen in class.
I guess my question is too, does this setback affect the barn location? Where is, and I can't, my eyes, I have perfect eyesight and I can't read this.
Only when it, excuse me, only when it houses animals do we require barns to be 100 feet. I mean, barn is loosely used. It's an accessory structure.
Right.
It's just a structure. It's not a barn with animals. That's only the times that we require 100-foot setback.
Okay, so this doesn't conflict with the next item on the agenda?
Correct.
Correct.
64-1840
Right.
then.
Correct. It's just a structure that
Okay,
they're
what
calling
is-
a barn, but it's not really a barn.
What is the purpose of the structure?
The purpose of the barn will be to do indoor baseball batting practice.
And also our teaching,
Yeah, right.
where we can teach health, nutrition, spiritual lessons on Saturday and a lot.
It'll be the storage of the maintenance equipment
Baseball.
and the bases, the bats, all the accoutrements, but the mowers and all that, so
So where-
storage. I'm sorry.
So where are these animals that you speak of?
If you will notice the periphery on, and to, as our topography tends to be in North Fulton, there was a fair amount of grading, so we have some slopes. And the intent is to ring the field with a fence, and then the exterior is going to be sheep, many horses, many cows, and they will maintain the green space around the field as opposed to, lawnmowers and other things. That is the intent. And then the surrounding AG property is going to be, agriculturally used, cows, horses, but there will be a fence surrounding the field itself, like the toe of the slope, top of the slope, and then the boundaries on the slopes will be, I don't know if you've ever been to Buford Dam where they have the goats that maintain the slope as opposed to lawnmowers. Same idea, sheep, goat, something to maintain that and give it a rural agricultural feel.
Okay. And again, I'm trying to pull this back in. I believe, just from what I'm hearing, that, the majority is certainly supportive of the baseball field and the use. We're going back to really it's the buffer, the trees and the buffer that seem to be the issue. Let me ask you a question, because I went out there and looked at it. And I certainly understand the concern of removing trees and planting trees back. But on the flip side, the rest of the property agricultural use, the look that I think a lot of us want to keep in Milton is pastures and fences and animals and such, not pine tree forests. Or I'm not saying there's anything wrong with either one, but I see the intent there. I also see where the applicant has went with the neighbors and made sure that they're planting enough there. I guess my question is, I understand AG1, you're allowed to certainly remove all the trees and have a pasture. This one particular piece where the baseball field is treated differently, but in reality is, with this special use permit, they really can't do anything else but have that baseball field, am I correct? Unless they were to ever come back and try to get it rezoned or whatever. And in my opinion, you know, we have folks from Milton or elsewhere and they're playing baseball and looking around seeing the pasture and animals. I think personally that looks better than, you know, planting a bunch of trees in that particular location. So, you know, I'd be open to coming up with a win-win situation there where, you know, we can address the buffer requirements for the neighbors, but also have the agricultural look that, you know, is everything around there. So, so it sounds like, you know, the buffer issue and then the concurrent variance, you know, those seem to be the only two real sticklers here that we are discussing. Karen?
I've got a question for our city arborist. As far as the tree recompense, how different is it if it's a commercial property rather than an agricultural property?
Okay, first of all, the recompense is more for specimen tree removal. This would be just replacement trees, replacing your density. And
We don't want them replaced with pine trees, so.
that's correct, that's correct. Your dense recompense or replacement trees for the commercial property would have been 30 units per acre, and that'd be 144 units.
And
how much would it be for a?
For agricultural, it'd be 15 units per acre, and that would total out to 84 units per acre.
Well, that would make more sense.
And what's explain a unit?
That's
a 1 inch caliber.
That's equivalent given to the size of the tree. Like a 4-inch caliber tree would be worth 0.7 units. 2-inch caliber tree would be worth 0.5
Yeah, I guess what
units.
I'm trying to do, you know, say if you had the 15 per acre.
300 trees.
No, if you had 84 units, let's see, 84 units, that would be, I thought I had that written down here somewhere.
But 144 would be.
144 would be about 208 trees, I believe, sort of.
A 4 inch is 0.6.
0.7.
But a 2 inch is how much?
0.5.
So if it was 2-inch trees, it would be 2 times 144.
A 2-inch tree, you would need 168 2-inch trees. 4-inch trees would be 124-inch trees.
I can tell you that's a lot of money.
Yeah,
A whole lot of money, a lot of trees. I want to just interject something. Before we clear cut the baseball field and cut a lot of the land to the south, a 5.5 acre pasture, my son and I went around. We flagged. We spent an afternoon flagging all the nice trees. And I can tell you the trees that were cut were sweet gums that were straight up and down, poplars straight up and down. They were not specimen trees, and they weren't even nice trees. Anything that was nice, we kept. And Mark, you've seen that, 5.5 acres. And on the eastern side of the baseball field, we've got some beautiful trees that we didn't touch those. Those are all nice trees. So we used to do tractor rides through there during pumpkin season, and I can tell you that they were straight up and down sweet gum trees. I mean, did you see those?
Yep.
Okay.
I mean,
So we took, when we graded for the greenhouses, we took a massive amount of topsoil and we put it in an area on the other side of the property. We're going to do about a 1 acre vegetable garden. We're going to plant one entire hill with blueberry bushes. I mean, lots and lots of blueberry bushes. So, I mean, and we're going to plant some fruit trees. So, I mean, I think we're doing some things to beautify the property. It may not meet this 144 trees or whatever it is, but we're making it nice. We're going to make it nice.
You know, again, I'll just add that I did visit the property, and I can kind of see the vision to where you have people there, they're playing baseball, but they also look in a pasture with animals. They also, like you said, you showed me the hill where the blueberries are going to be, the vegetable garden. I mean, to me, I get that feel that's something that, you know, Milton, look, but Lance, you haven't said much yet.
Okay, yeah. Specifically to the use, just a few items. The line that's designated here between, I guess, the proposed shade houses and the baseball field, is that just the use line? It's not a property line?
Correct. The acreage is just a use permit,
So it's just a
legal
use line, so
description.
that
Yes,
isn't a
it's
property
not,
line.
he's not going to divide it.
Right, there's not a legal subdivided line or anything?
well,
it's not going to be a change of ownership, but there has to be a legally defined legal description,
Right.
meets and bounds.
I understand that, just for the use permit.
Yes, for
Yes.
that and for CUVA.
For what?
The conservation.
Okay.
So
I understand. But it's not a property line.
No, it's not going to be,
So
the
it
property's
doesn't
not
really
being
fall into the
subdivided.
category for a buffer then, if it's not a property line. Okay, that's my one point. Secondly, firstly, I think it's nice, what you're trying to do here is very admirable, okay? I'm a big baseball guy. My son played baseball, coached, did all that.
That was in
You know,
Virginia.
In Virginia, yeah, in Virginia. I've never done it in Georgia. I've spectated in Georgia.
Inside joke.
Okay, you know, Bobby Cox did ask me to come out and give him some advice, but then he retired. So I do want to, as far as the tree record prints, again, I think maybe, you know, it's a little bit, it's overboard. I think maybe what would be more appropriate would be maybe just along the property lines that you do have, the adjoining property line, would be to form some kind of buffer, just a buffer strip, not a legally buffer like 50 foot, but a buffer planting along the property line, just to buffer the adjacent property line, sort of like what you're doing for Mr. Bates there, but not to the extent of a tree recompense, okay? You talked about planting some blueberries and those types of things, you know, to create just some sort of vegetative buffer between the property line. That's all I've got to say on that. As far as the parking spaces, they did say that, you know, you would be required to have parking. My only point on that, since it is a different parcel, my only suggestion would be to have some sort of easement recorded over that in case there was a change of ownership. And this continued and change of ownership that would legally give this rights to have parking over on the greenhouse, the nursery site. And plus, this, are you going to operate this under an LLC or a nonprofit or something like that?
Nonprofit.
A nonprofit?
Yes.
So, but you're going to do a 501? Right, okay. So, you know, that is a nonprofit entity, so, you know, you could do some sort of easement that actually gave perpetual rights to that entity for parking.
It's in the staff report, I thought.
Yes,
Well, it
it's-
just said parking, but it didn't say anything. But I just want to make that in passing. Talk about lighting, no lighting at all. I mean, wouldn't you want some sort of security lighting or something out there?
That would be nice.
I mean, I understand no lighting in terms of ball field lighting. Yeah, I understand that. I mean, that's an issue whenever you, fields we played on in Virginia were, you know, lit, and they were near residential areas, and, you know, there were folks that, you know, loved the field, but there were those that, you know, didn't like it or didn't like the noise. So, but I would think, you know, you might want to think about that in terms of at least allow some, you know, low-level security lighting or something like that instead of saying no lighting at all. I already talked about the tree recompense and having a buffer. Have you already you've already cleared to the property lines now? I mean,
Pretty much.
Okay, yes. So you've already cleared what would be the buffer.
There is a tree line, I mean, we did, maybe within 6-8 feet of the property line.
Okay, but there are already trees within that buffer
There are
right now?
trees on the property line.
Okay, and this calculated recompense, is that taking into account the trees that are already there, still there? And the caliper of those trees?
Yes, any tree that is on their property will count toward the density requirement, and any trees planted in the buffer to meet that buffer standard would count towards your density requirement also.
Okay. So, anyway, I agree. I think there should be some sort of compromise on the amount of planting that would be required. Try to meet maybe the intent, but, you know, definitely not a commercial use. So, I think those are my 2 cents.
Well, thank you. I went to Jack's house yesterday. Jack Lawrence is the one that lives to the property owner to the east. And Jack is fine with that property line like it is with the big hardwoods. He doesn't want a buffer. I don't want a buffer. I like looking at his pasture and his horses. So, and he signed off that he doesn't want it. Mr. Bateman, he wanted a few things, but his house in reality is probably 800 feet from the corner of the property. You can't see his house from the corner. But I agreed to put in those trees for him, and he was happy with that.
Might want to put a green giant in, like Boston has in the left field there. You truncate the left field. Okay.
Okay. Did you, Bill?
Just one question for Mark Law. I assume the original grading permit was issued almost a year ago. I assume that you did a site survey prior to issuing that permit then to establish the number of trees that would have been recompensed. Is that correct?
We did a drive-through looking at for specimen trees, and the specimen trees had been preserved in that the area that's out there right now. There weren't very many specimens, but that was under the use that they were going to clear it for an agricultural for their animals and just a place for the kids to play ball. So being a strictly agricultural use, then that he had a lot more flexibility on tree removal on that.
Correct. But you're basing this recompense calculation now on the number of specimen trees that were there a year ago. Is that correct?
Just on the density that the property is void now. So that's why we'd apply to anybody on that size of property. Requires so many units per acre, and we'd be looking for the replacement of that many units.
To clarify, you said that, and this also to the applicant, is there are still some trees in some areas of the property, correct, or not?
Correct, yeah. Yes.
So those, including the specimen trees, do those count as units?
They would, well, only on the, I mean, you've got a 22-acre property, but there's a 4.81. This is all memory, so forgive me if my numbers are out just a little bit. That is special use. So, originally when we went in, we were considering the property as a whole. So we went in as the whole property, identified the specimen trees, created a tree save area around that. This 4.81 acres had been timber harvested probably in the 70s. So we had first regrowth of pines and sweet gums and poplars of 8 to 12 inch caliper average, maybe some few larger in this area. No specimen trees. The only large trees were on the periphery, so that's what has been preserved. The hardwoods, I'm working from memory, there's a dozen hardwoods along that east property line, and then there were some dogwoods and there's a triple trunk poplar or something in Mr. Bateman, or what I'm calling the Bateman corner, that we preserved. But for lack of a better term, trash trees, the sweet gums, the pines, the spindly stuff that had regrowth after the timbering that were very densely packed in there were graded up.
Okay,
But
and this question is for Mark. Looking at the property as a whole, and then the 4.8 acres, say, where the special use permit is, in your opinion, Mark, is that, and you may not know, and that was pretty much clear cut, am I correct? So is that, the 4.8 acres, is that what you're calculating your recompense or tree replacement on 4.8?
Yes, for that use permit. That's where I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and that being said, I would certainly give way some consideration if, there were, as we're talking about, a lot of nice trees or specimen trees versus what most people would want to cut down. Is there consideration to be given there?
I'm confused at why we're talking about tree density on a special use permit specifically designed for a baseball field. You can't have tree density in a baseball field.
No, you can't.
You have to
No, I understand that, Joe, but the whole point here is that we're trying to take something that we modeled, I think, for something completely different and fit it on top of this. We're putting a square peg in a round hole. I think we need to give this guy some leeway on this, and we seem to be dancing around the same thing and not getting any kind of decision.
You know, I keep trying to pull it back to that, and that was my point earlier on.
Okay.
You know, I certainly would like to see some leeway, but you know, the council needs to make a decision, and if there's other folks that want to have something, you know, maybe it's a compromise, but, you know, I'm all for, again, I picture it as an agricultural baseball field. I see people coming out there playing and look around and see the pastures and the fences and the gardens and things like that, but that's my position. Go ahead and.
I've been to Scottsdale Farms many times, and great place, you know, and love the lobster bisque. Right, it's fantastic. And I see what you're trying to do. I think it's great. I think that, you know, as far as so long as your neighbors, you know, are okay with the idea and they signed off on that, I'm happy with that. From the tree recompense, you know, I think what we're trying to get at is, do we want to have the total replacement of trees and have you be at a financial disadvantage for that? I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think, you know, if you have ideas for something else, like what the mayor was talking about with other different bushes or things that you were going to put in to beautify the area, that would be fine. I don't know if there's a way in our motion that we can require that, but that's, you know, if that's what their intent is, that's okay. But it's not a deal breaker for me. Where I sit is, so long as Mr. Bateman is happy, you know, obviously I think some people were just shocked about what was going on because of the process that was going in. I think that's good. I don't think when I went to the meetings, they didn't have any issue with the buffers. That was not an issue. It was just sight, visual, and I'm okay with your request on the buffers from that standpoint. The rest of the council will have to say and everything else, but that's where I stand.
Okay. Anybody else?
So just so we can prepare for a motion, I heard 3 different things mentioned that we need to say yay or nay about. The first one has to do with the setback or buffer area, granting the variance that's been requested. The second is granting or removing or reducing the required tree density related to the property. And then the third thing that I heard was, and maybe I'm just putting it in there, the question of whether or not we should allow or disallow concessions. So, was there something that I missed? Was there anything else that we need to include in the motion itself?
Safety lighting.
Safety lighting, I think, would be appropriate.
Do we have a definition for safety lighting?
We could probably define.
You schedule when it's light.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You schedule when it's light. I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, it
I'm
says
sure they're
daylight
allowed
use.
on the quote barn building. I'm sure they're allowed some, you know, just a fixture or something on the building itself that would be a small illumination.
Well, I
What's
think
the- what's
one
the-
option there is motion detectors. I think works well in an agricultural area like that.
Well,
It wouldn't violate the lighting requirements.
Karen?
This is Joe. About what you're saying on your last point. I would love to recompense with, you know, 300-400 blueberry bushes and fruit trees and things that actually look nice, and vegetable garden, you know, if that's acceptable to y'all. And we're gonna make it look nice. I mean, we don't want anything that doesn't look nice out there, because it's a reflection on us, the Scottsdale Farms, and the baseball program. And I live about a mile and a half away, so I've got to look at people in the face when I go to the grocery store. I like people to be happy. If you might consider the concession stands, I know from experience that like Bella Luna Cafe, it's not a big money maker. You know, it's really there for the people, for the customers. If you consider letting us have some concessions, even if it's limited, hydrating the kids. You know, sometimes kids want a hot dog. We don't serve hot dogs at Bella Luna Cafe. You know, it's a little, you know, paninis and all that stuff. So maybe just some things like they do at Hopewell Baseball. That'd be great. Just drinks, some things that the kids might like.
And candy,
Grill,
candy,
something
you gotta have
outside.
candy.
Yeah.
Big League Chew.
You gotta have candy, you know, blow pops, and they bring pops, and that kind of stuff.
RC
Karen, did you or Matt have? Karen, you had a point?
Yeah, I'd like to get the city arborist opinion on that, because, I mean, to me, I don't know why he can't recompense with fruit trees and blueberry bushes and things like that. I'd rather see a field of blueberry bushes than a bunch of scraggly pines and sweet gums. So what are how much flexibility do we have in that And I also don't believe it ought to have to be done at a commercial, based on the commercial standards. I think if anything, it needs to be based on the, an AG1 standard for the recompense. But what are your thoughts on allowing some fruit trees, some blueberry bushes and things like that as part of the recompense?
Go to the agricultural, I could go with that too, with the 15 units per acre. I think that would be acceptable out there. Fruit trees, the purpose of the replacement trees and density is to help provide canopy, the tree canopy in the city. And that's what we're trying to do is maintain and provide tree canopy. Fruit trees are a shorter lived tree. You're not going to have the canopy. They're more of an understory type tree or a crop or whatever. And that's just, you're just not getting the canopy replacement that you would on your typical hardwoods or some understory trees. We can be flexible on a lot of the plantings. We don't allow, or we don't give credit for fruit trees or ornamental trees anywhere in the city if somebody wants to use those. You can add them to your landscape. Looks great, but we just don't apply credit.
But if we have enough fruit trees, blueberry bushes, and a big enough garden, that takes care of the concession stand.
Well, legally, what can the call be? I'm assuming if the council made a motion and approved no recompense, they could, as long as the buffers were maintained for the property owners where they discussed. Am I correct? I mean, it's kind of, is it up to the council, or is that something that legally need to stick with the recompense?
Well, I don't know that the council would have the ability to just not comply with your own tree code. I don't think you have the ability to do that.
Can we comply with it as an agricultural zone property rather than as a commercial property in this case? Because I don't think it really fits in either category.
It's AG1 now, isn't it?
I mean, it's staying as an AG1 property, so why do they need to recompense based on the commercial use rather than a...
No, Mark said...
Yeah, but that's what, this is what was in our packet originally, was based on the commercial use. We don't need to do that, do we?
I'm less concerned about that issue.
Okay.
I think if you have selected a use categorization that you feel comfortable with, that is plausible and can be defended, that's fine, but you just can't ignore and I'm not suggesting anybody here was saying ignore it, but you just can't ignore the code altogether.
Let me,
Is there a time frame that our tree code, I apologize, I'm not up to snuff on our tree code. It was a couple of years ago that we voted on it, but is there some time consideration that we can put into the equation that would, rather than having to be compliant day one, they could be compliant day 365 or 720 or something like that?
Councilman Longoria, just off the top of my head, I'm not sure if there's an expectation written in the ordinance as to when compliance has to be, compelled. I'll have to defer to the arborist on that.
If it's a permit, it's before the CO is released. If it's a permitted project.
let me ask this, since the applicant owns a nursery and has lots of trees, bald and burlapped, I'm going to say, assume he couldn't just stick those over, those don't count, but, would there be a way that there could be an area that the applicant plants the trees, grows them, when they get to a certain side, uses them for his business, sells them, and replaces them, kind of, give you some area that for your business, but also may not have permanent trees there, but it's putting permanent trees hopefully somewhere in Milton as they sell them.
They just have to maintain density and perpetuity. So if they remove and replace, they're meeting that requirement.
Bill?
Yeah, we've got an area where we're growing trees now on the side and plots. But let me just step on my shoes for a minute, my legal shoes, I guess. But let me just ask y'all this: if everybody prefers blueberries and a big vegetable garden and fruit trees to these other trees, who's going to sue the city? Who's going to complain about that? Why is there a legal concern?
Ken, I'll let you address
well,
that.
the reason there's a legal concern is because even if someone doesn't sue us, that's not the reason that we make the decisions that we make. We make the decisions because we adopt these ordinances and intend to comply with
And it wouldn't be someone suing the city because you did it, but then the next person will, you let them do it. Why don't-
There's that's right. There's
You
a
don't wanna set a
precedent. There's a
precedent.
precedent
Yeah.
component as well.
But in my mind, you have a board like this that's elected to make decisions. Sometimes maybe they can look at decisions individually, even though you don't want to do that for everybody, because then, yes, you set a precedent. But if there's a unique situation, maybe it could be considered.
Clarification, Mr. Law. The AG1 recommends is 15 units per acre?
That's correct.
It's a silly question, but almost on AG1, since you could basically clear cut and all, why is there even a classification for AG1 recompense?
The clear cutting, and that's, you can do a lot of that without having to have a tree removal permit. But there's still the requirement of density units per acre, being an agricultural. And I think the exemption is if it's a bona fide agricultural use. And that's where the ballpark does not come in as a bona fide agricultural use.
But existing trees do count toward
The
those
density.
units per
Yeah,
acre.
all we ask is that the density be maintained on site. Now, where the question here is now, do we go with density on the remaining portion of the project? Because under the initial grading, it was almost for the entire project. And so now he's got the use permit, or the use coming in for the smaller section for the ball field. We're allowing density for the other part that he has on the adjacent part on his other property to apply toward.
I'm almost thinking, though, in this case, you're going to have to do something like that because the property for the baseball field, you can't put trees on it.
Mhm.
You can't put trees in the outfield or in the middle, so it is going to have to be.
That's not saying they can't, the way we usually do it, they're still responsible for density. If they can't get them on the side, in that area, they would still
They'd have
plant
to put it
elsewhere.
somewhere else.
Right.
I guess our question is, how would we base the recompense? I know it's 15 units per acre, but then is there anything existing out there that they get credit for?
On that, in the ball field, this portion right here, I don't think there's anything out here now, is there?
Yes. Well, the eastern property line, we've got those big hardwoods.
Yes. Right.
4.8 acres.
Lawrence property. There's 8 or 10 hardwoods.
Okay,
on
so-
the property line.
Sorry.
And then
Given
there
the fact
are 3
that there's
trees.
some
and
extenuating circumstances with this piece of property, since there's so many parcels that join together,
Yes, yeah,
they've
you
got
get
common
credit for what's
ownership,
out
but
there.
we're not trying to lump them together for the purposes of the special use permit. Could council specify
Right.
a density value that could be used in this particular case to sort of clear the confusion? Without worrying about setting a precedence.
I'm not sure, Councilman Longoria, that I understand the question.
What I was gonna say is, we could, since there is adjoining properties that have common ownership.
Right.
But they're not all grouped together for the purposes of the special use permit, it's a very cloudy issue on what densities we're really talking about, because if we focus down on just the ball field, it's obvious we can't put trees on the ball field. So is there a way we could call out the density in this specific case, remove all doubt, and let everybody know exactly what our intent was?
Yes, in theory, I think that's fine.
Well, let me
Be acceptable.
continue on with my question to Mark. And I know it's all ballpark now, but you guys are talking about 8 to 10 hardwoods that are around the border, correct? That are on that 4.8 acres?
Yes, they are. They're on the
And
eastern boundary.
if we're talking, Mark, you said AG1 is 15 units per acre.
Mhm.
So 5 times, 70 some units, whatever the calculation is. Guesstimate if you had 8 or 10, I don't know if they're fairly large hardwoods, how much credit would that give you?
It's hard, I'm not sure what size trees they are. If I remember correctly, there are some sizable trees along that rear property
There's
line.
16 to 20 inch.
Yeah, so that would go on, if you have
20
27.
inches, about 2.8.
Think so. So, I mean,
There's one that's
Between that and the magnolia trees you already have agreed to plant, I'm just wondering how much, if we're just sitting here spending a lot of time talking about,
I'd say we'll come in with what's there and what's proposed planning. He's probably gonna be in 22 to 28 units. So we're still lacking 40 units, which is a 4-inch trees, 0.7, so we're looking at 60 trees to need to be planted. Or we can give the city of Milton the money, correct?
Correct, or if you're planting around the buffer, again, that would go towards the credit too, if you do the planting in the buffer, or anywhere on site.
Okay.
Bill?
Mark, you mentioned before a CO is issued that these trees have to be planted. Do we in fact require a CO on a ball field?
Well, if it's, yeah, the barn, the building.
Barn's not getting built.
Okay, but the barn's not gonna be built according to Luca
Yeah,
here.
raise up some money, but it's just gonna be a few years. at
Few
least.
years, so we're talking after the completion of the barn.
Well, typically what we do there is when they come in for the permit, the building permit, land disturbance permit, that's when we get the bond. They get a bond, and I don't think you're having to come in for a permit now, are you?
no,
So,
not till.
But the bond's still contingent, or the tree planting is still contingent on issuing a CO, which you're not gonna issue when the
And-
ball
At this
field's
point.
complete, right?
No, not until the,
At some point,
Barn's
it's gonna be
complete.
addressed.
Right.
so he would have probably 3 to 4 years to complete the tree
Right.
recompense.
I'm just wondering if there's obviously you could plant some smaller trees now and possibly 3 to 4 years, they'd be worth more units.
By the time the bond's full.
But, again, I'll throw out, and this is really, I don't know, maybe we should, because how do you monitor stuff? But, like I said, if you picked an area on this property where you were growing trees that benefit you, but also benefit tree coverage for.
If I might, is there any way that the surrounding, did we get an answer on the surrounding 18 acres that even though it's AG exempt from the tree ordinance, and it is a bona fide agricultural use, there are sufficient tree units with the specimen trees and the other trees that he saved, which he was completely within his rights to cut for pasture? Is there no way that a condition or something could be added in that the trees be, counted
Credit.
and kept from the surrounding property and the same ownership to meet the density requirements of an AG tree density calculation? That is what we would see. There's just, I'm speaking out of hand, I guess. I don't think the tree ordinance, the intent was on an open space or a field for an applicant who could not, there's no way to meet the tree densities and do what he wants to do with the open space. But he can give the city of Milton the money, and I do not think that was the intent of the tree ordinance when I was here, at its inception.
That question really would pose to Mark as far as, if there's some way to credit the surrounding property and the trees,
well, the comment I had about that is he had density out there in the first place, had more than enough density, had the buffers, everything. If he had not cleared all the way up to the buffers and cleared all that area, density in the buffer would be no issue. But he cleared under an agricultural, cleared all that. Now we're coming back. Can I have a variance to reduce the buffer and not have any density units, not have to do my density units?
I understand. Is there, and I don't know the property, but is there any part of the agricultural property that you did not clear?
Yes.
That you saved trees on that you could have cleared?
Yes.
That we could put a stipulation that those have to stay?
Yeah,
We had a large site plan that was passed around. It's on the board.
Right there.
Okay. If you'll notice, there is an area where I've located the specimen trees. There existing.
Yeah, right.
So,
Hang
this.
on. We gotta be in there.
If you guys have a copy of the site plan accessible, we show the surrounding properties. Adjacent to the south property line, we have denoted a tree save area. This was an area of dogwoods and better trees that when Luca and his son walked out, he instructed me to create this tree save area that was totally within the AG property. So this area highlighted there. Also, there's another tree save area where we've got the 32-inch poplars, the dogwoods, the 34-inch white oak, and there are additional trees in there that don't meet the specimen tree requirements, so they're not individually shown. But these two tree save areas that we incorporated into the AG design that were totally beyond the requirements, and he made a point of saving those trees. So what I'm asking is there any way that we can incorporate these areas that he saved the trees in instead of cutting them for pasture to meet the density requirements on the 4.8 acres?
And that was my question to Mark, if he could look at it and give him credit for that.
Okay, well, some of those trees have to be saved anyway because they're specimen, so we're not really getting anything out of that. But I'll tell you what, I'm looking at here, being let me get my bearings straight. The south property line butts up to his property. The north property line butts up to almost a stream buffer area, so I don't think anything's going to happen up there. The eastern property, if the council be willing, I think if we could address that, focus on that eastern buffer there, I think that'd be.
That's the property that Jack owns, and he doesn't want a buffer.
He's grazing horses, and horses like grass and trees.
What, in here?
This property line, this is an equestrian used property. I mean, it's pasture.
I guess where I go back to, if under AG1, he could, whatever the total amount of acreage is, we talking 18 acres, I've heard, whatever. If he wanted to legally, he could clear cut that totally. Is there some of it they did not clear cut that we could stipulate and say, these trees in this corner count because you could, I'm assuming, can you take specimen trees down on AG1?
No.
No, okay. So, but are there other trees that are left that you could count as part of the density?
Yes. In that, right, there are some trees on the southern property, but I don't know how we can protect those in perpetuity if that property could be sold. So, but,
yeah, I understand that, but yeah, I mean,
but I think we can go with the density that's in that area that Mr. Reese mentioned.
I think
with the
what
specimen
I'm hearing
trees.
is the intent is to try to work within, and I know it's a little, but within our tree ordinance to the intent. Obviously, we want trees, but also with the use of the baseball field, which you can't have trees on. The rest of it agricultural, and also the expense and cost of, adding a whole bunch of trees.
Well, if I can make one other suggestion. How about, if it's acceptable, the landscape strip you approved, or that you talked to Mr. Bateman about?
Yeah.
Beefing that area up but not with fruit trees or blueberries, but more your native plantings. So we're looking at this, just kind of renaturalize that area, make it a little more congruent with what's out there, what was out there. So we're looking at this area right back in here.
Brian may buy his property, then he's gonna wanna cut all that down. Right, 'cause he wants to walk the field. I mean,
Mr. Beason wants to sell his
yeah.
property. One of his concerns was that someone will not want to look at that baseball field, so we're in negotiations right now. I'm going to look at buying the 10 acres behind the field.
I'm kinda kidding with you, but yeah, if you want some native plants in there.
Well, we're trying to, and that's a good point that, maybe you beef that up a little. Maybe, Mark, you're able to count some of the other trees that were on the AG1 property. And it, it gets down to where between that and plantings and the gardens and all that, you come up with something that's real close. Is that feasible?
I mean, you're showing your landscaping there, here anyway. I'm just talking about with acceptable trees.
Well, that's going to be magnolias, and that's not going to be the fruit trees or the blueberries.
Would be a mix, magnolias, hardwoods, understory, just like I said, give it a natural look.
There was a tree planting guide that was given to
Yeah,
Rob.
the buffer, we've got standards.
Blue ice, cypress, magnolias.
I think what
We
Mark's
can work with you
saying,
on that, but it has to be a certain number.
I think what Mark's saying, you're saying include what they've shown, but beef that up a little bit?
Mainly just,
Or, I don't know if that counts. Does that count? That would count,
yeah,
correct?
we can give that, instead of beefing up, mainly just go with the plant selection, and improved plant selection.
So that would give them credit. Then if you can look and, like I say, you have to reach a little bit, but look and see what else is on the property that.
The
Right.
adjoining property.
Yeah,
That's what we're
the
asking
18A, whatever, everything
that
around
be
it. We know
included
the baseball field can't have trees on it.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sorry.
No, and, come up with kind of a win-win where, but, Bill, you've got a question?
Let's go back to the original grading permit. If that was, if he was grading that property or clear cutting it in accordance to his rights under AG1 ownership, what was your requirement at that time when you issued that permit?
Density requirements, specimen trees and density, and he met all that.
And he met it?
Yes.
It's met right now?
Well, that was when it was the entire, all three parcels. And so he's sectioned it out now, taking the small section out for the commercial, or
Another question.
the use.
How about if he legally went in and incorporated those three parcels into one parcel?
That'd be a whole different issue there. I mean, it would work if this were all one parcel. Then
That's a good idea, but I've got, under the CUVA, which is conservation use easement, or conservation use, what does that stand for?
Agreement.
I had all this under CUVA, all the 18 and a half acres, and with the baseball field now, what I've got to do is I've got to take that out of CUVA, so I basically have breached CUVA. Then I've got to reapply for CUVA on the balance of the acreage. So they're not going to allow me to keep the baseball field in the same tract and keep it under CUVA. So I'm going to have to pay higher property taxes now on the baseball field portion, 4.81 acres, and pay about $18,000 back property taxes as a penalty.
That's a
So
lot of
yes, I would
trees.
love to do what you're saying, Mark, but I can't.
It doesn't work. We tried that, and he is agreeing, he signed up in 10-year increments not to develop the rest of the property. So, his intent, some of those of us who grew up here's intent is to maintain the look and the atmosphere that we grew up in, which was fields, farms. But I understand you guys, I'm just trying to see if there's any way we could condition it to get to the point.
Can we still go back to the last conversation we had where if Mark can count the whole 18, or not the whole 18, but part of the 18 acres that you didn't clear, if there's trees that they could have removed but didn't, again, I know you can't off the top of your head or just look at the plan, but give credit for that. Give some credit for the buffer that they're talking about planting by the adjacent property owners. I'm trying to think, maybe this will come up to where it's a moot point and you might have to plant 2 trees or something. I don't know. I'm asking for an educated guess now. Is that between our professional staff and your engineer, is that a likely scenario or not?
I think so. Again, like I said, just that area that he's shown the landscape, we can just come to an agreement on the plant species, and I believe we can do that. I can be flexible. I think we can come on a mutual agreement there.
I just, as having to prepare tree replacement plans, the planting of 2 and 4 inch trees, and when you get credits of 0.5, 0.6, when we're talking in number, 85 units, 143 units, the numbers of trees, when you start talking in hundreds of replanted trees, it becomes economically burdensome and onerous to where it's not a doable project if he's got to plant 80 to 150 trees. If there's no way that we can incorporate these trees on the adjacent property, it's, that's.
Chris?
Hey, Mr. Mayor, I've sat here and I'm going to weigh in just quickly because I want to put the staff in a decent place at the end of tonight, wherever we end up. If we're going to consider that type of a condition, the best I can hope for tonight is that any motion that would be made would be ambiguous at best, because we're asking for a condition to be evaluated that we don't know, the applicant doesn't know. We're here today because they're seeking a use permit, and that's not an entitlement. That's something that you can grant if you want, and there are conditions that not the staff nor you as a council has created that has put the applicant in the condition that they're in today, seeking this use permit. So, if there's some movement towards trying to figure out how we make a recompense situation work on an adjacent property, I would think at the very least tonight, I would ask that you push this out a month so that we can actually do that work and come back to you with a recommendation. I don't know if you were to make a motion tonight to go ask the staff to count trees on 18 acres. I don't know how we do that, and I don't know that we would feel comfortable issuing a go-ahead green light because we don't know what exists out there. And if you want to give us some guidance and point us in a direction and have us go do that work and come back a month from now, I'd feel better with that than having you try to craft a motion around an ambiguous concept, because I'm not going to know how to enforce that. Just my 2 cents.
And that makes sense. Again, and that's why I was asking staff and their engineer, just an educated guess if it could happen, but I certainly agree with that. And I would, look to the applicant if you guys think that makes sense, if there's a chance that would work, it may be worthwhile for you to defer it for 30 days. Or if you don't have that much time or whatever, you may want to hear it tonight and make the decision, and we may have to, specify some recompense or something that the council's comfortable with. If both sides, the staff and your professional opinion is looking at what you got on the plans you got now, that, hey, that's probably not going to make sense. Let's don't spend 30 days even going doing that. You might want to speak up, or again, I'm open to whatever the council thinks on that. Chris has got a good point, but I don't, in general, I don't like just to defer things if it's just deferring the same decision 30 days from now and taking time for you guys.
Yeah, I would defer if we could consider the special situation that exists in this particular case where pieces of property with common ownership can't be joined together because of real issues. The Coosa thing is preventing him from including all this property as one big piece, and if it was one big piece, he'd be in compliance right now. So I think we need to give special consideration to that. So if we can figure out a way to make that happen.
I agree, but we got to keep in mind that's a self-imposed. The Coosa thing is a benefit. There's a big savings there too. So it's.
I'm just trying to inject
some
common sense here.
Where I'm going. I'm common sense too. But Bill.
Well, I'd promote deferring this in researching our ordinance to see what we can make work. Certainly, we don't want to sit here tonight and come up with some decision that's in violation of our own tree ordinance. So.
Especially not when we're celebrating the National Arbor Day
Yeah,
proclamation.
we got a flag. We got a flag. Now, but again, as a property owner and applicant, feel free to weigh in if you would agree and want to defer for 30 days and try to work something out. That's fine. But if that puts you on a time constraint and seasonal, I don't know exactly, date-wise, what if that may mess you up and you may not want to do that.
I would be fine with not putting on a jacket and khakis again. But, if Mark and I can just agree on that area that you talked about, that buffer, beefing that up, and you come up with a fair number of trees based on your calculations, I'm fine with that area. It's about, 100 feet? Something like that. It's not.
I think we need to postpone, and we already
I mean, just keep in mind, if we do that, you know, basically, you're committing to working with Mark, to where Mark feels comfortable as a staff member, you know, giving the recommendation, am I correct? That, you know, it's up to Mark to make sure the intent, he feels comfortable with the intent of the tree ordinance and whatnot. It's, you know, I guess that would leave you up to, you know, you may come back and say, well, I count these and these and these, but you still need to plant 20 or 30 or 10 or whatever. Am I correct? Is that?
The only problem I have with staff interpreting the spirit of an ordinance is we don't interpret the spirit of it. We interpret the ordinance, and it's the council's job if there's a deviation from that to give it an alternate interpretation. So I don't know that I'm comfortable with a recommendation to allow staff to interpret the spirit of the ordinance and make an agreement. That's where I get a little bit.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not. I'm thinking staff actually has to. Staff has to look. You know, go out there, look at the trees on the rest of the property, do a calculation of the buffer, and then make make your report that, you know, you either meet it or you've got to add trees. Am I correct? I mean, that's kind of black and white. Am I wrong?
As long as there's a formula that's based upon something that black and white, that we can make a determination yes or no. But if you're going to make the use permit contingent upon that, if it's no, then the use permit does not issue until that no becomes a yes. So there'd have to be some kind of contingency in there.
Mr. Mayor, let me offer something that may help the council on this. As I understand it, one of the elements of relief tonight pertains to the 50-foot setback along the north and east property lines, and also needs to implicate the southern property line. The southern property line, that particular component was not advertised. So, and my position is if it was not advertised, it's got to be advertised, because we advertised with that much specificity. We said north and east property line. If you want to include that southern property line in there, we need to run another legal ad under the Zoning Procedures Act.
Is that, to clarify, is that southern property line, it's actually it's your property on both sides?
Yeah, 5.5 acres, yes, I
Mhm.
own it to the south.
Right.
But in order to not have a buffer there, or the planted buffer, legally, you're saying needs to be
That's right. I mean, the legal advertisement's got to be
And
correct.
why not to the west?
Because it's not a separate, that's not a separate tax parcel.
Okay.
I think that is the southern property line is where we're proposing putting the buffer for Mr. Bateman. Even though
But it's still a 50-foot, not a 75-foot one.
there's a tree save area on the other portion of it.
But that's off your property, that's off of the legal description of the use permit.
I didn't know these laws written away.
Sounds like we're gonna need to defer it regardless.
Well, the only other, you're saying legally, if we were to make a decision tonight, they would have to, on the southern property line, even though he owns both sides,
Absolutely.
he would have to do the full planted buffer.
That's correct. That's correct. Because obviously that other parcel could be sold, so.
And it would have to be a 75-foot one,
Mhm.
Right.
which
Okay.
would not be in conformance with the plan that we have before us.
Correct.
I don't know if the applicant, if Scott, Luke, if you guys, Ryan, heard that. What our city attorney is saying, that because legally the south property line was not advertised as the possibility of eliminating that buffer, that legally, if we make a decision tonight, we would have to include that buffer being put on the south property line. And if we want to consider not having it, it needs to be advertised correctly. I mean, and again, I'm all for, I don't want to put on khakis and come here either just to spend time. And I certainly respect you and your professional staff's time. But hearing that, we may want to get that correct.
No, I mean, the council
And
can go
you're-
forward tonight. They just need to go forward with what was advertised. And if they want complete relief, then they would need to have that new legal ad run.
So you're saying we could not approve the site plan as presented because of the
It shows a
buffer issue
southern-
on the south property line?
That's correct.
Scott, I mean, you,
We need to defer.
yeah. Okay. You know, hopefully we can advertise that if it's what you want to do,
And I'll meet
spend-
with Mark and see if we
spend the
can.
time productively so that it can be cut and dry, and maybe we won't have to spend a whole lot of time. I think you see the intent of the council. What I'm reading is we want to work with you and have, but, you know, we need to meet the letter of the law also. So it may be a productive time.
But we'll
30
work
days.
up a written tree survey where we go out and specifically identify trees on the adjoining piece and see if we can meet the AG, it's not recompense, but tree density requirements.
Density requirements. And that gives our staff some
Yes.
comfort, a lot of time too.
Right, so I will, Mark and I work together on several projects, so we'll see if we can't get something semantically and legally palatable.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate y'all working with me.
Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
All right.
I move that we defer the agenda item. Agenda item 13089 to the May 20th council meeting.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion for deferral from Councilmember Large, a second from Councilmember Thurman. Is there any discussion?
I do have one question while you're debating this motion.
Okay.
If we're going to do productive work in the next month, we're going to have to come back with recommendations that deal with a little bit more than trees. So kind of wanting to gauge some sense of whether or not we come back with a recommendation for or against lighting or for or against concession stands, just so that we bring you back a good work
I'll
product.
throw out my thoughts and then see what the council says.
You just
I
kind of
would
guide me on that.
I would say no to lighting. And, you know, I would say on a concession stand, I understand, maybe we limit it to something where you have the ability to serve drinks and snacks and candy and whatnot. And if, you know, one of the parents or guys want to put a gas grill out there and grill hot dogs or whatever, but just not a commercial kitchen or a kind of a production type concession stand. Does that make
I'll
sense?
second that.
Okay. So is everybody
Is
on
that generally the thought? Okay, that gives
Does that
me
make
what I
sense?
need. Yeah, that we can.
That gives you
we can
some
address it all.
flexibility, but it's not a full-blown commercial hood going out and building. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, I will make a comment before we vote to the applicant and to our staff. I appreciate all the time and effort we all have spent prior to this and now, and I really hate that we're not able to make a decision, but I think this is a case where I think ultimately for the city and for the applicant, 30 days will be beneficial. So I appreciate everybody on that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay.
All right, moving on, the next is consideration.
Number 4.
Number 4, consideration of RZ 13-08 to adopt a new use permit within Article 9, Division 5, Miscellaneous Uses, Section 641840, Barns or Riding Areas, Agenda Item 13091. First presentation at April 8th, regular council meeting discussed at the council work session on April 15th. Kathy Field.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Mr. Mayor, these amendments were discussed at the work session last week, and essentially the first text amendment, RZ 13-08, is a new use permit for barns or riding areas. And as you know, you approved the location of barns at the March 19th meeting, and we did allow that for certain situations. There may be situations where a use permit would be required, and so this sets the standards for those use permits for the barns and the riding areas. And then related to that, RZ 1309, which is the next item, clarifies definitions that are mentioned in the use permit as they relate to barns and riding areas in terms of defining what they are. I know there was an issue that came up, or a question came up at the last meeting about whether or not the Horse Council had weighed in on this, and we have reviewed both of these amendments with the Horse Council, and they are satisfied with them.
Okay. Bill?
Any other revisions since work session,
No.
since last week?
No.
Okay. Anybody else? Matt?
Now I'll make a motion
Okay.
that we approve a consideration of RZ 13-08 to adopt a new use permit within Article 9, Division 5, miscellaneous uses, Section 64-1840, barns or riding areas, agenda item number 13091.
Second the motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I hate to interject again, but if we could withdraw the second and withdraw the motion, quickly ask for the public hearing and close it, and then move forward again.
That's totally my fault.
Withdraw the second.
Withdraw the first.
Withdraw the first. All right, is there any public comment?
There is no public
I'll
comment.
take that as a no.
Yeah, there is no public comment.
Sorry, we just want to make sure you
You got in trouble a lot in school, didn't you? Not paying attention and chit-chatting with the others. Okay, we'll close the public hearing then if we have no public comment on that, and now I'll open up for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve agenda item number 13-091.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Kuntz, second by Councilmember Lusk. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. All right, we'll move on to our next item.
The next item is consideration of RZ 13-09 to amend Chapter 64 zoning ordinance, Article 1 in general, Section 64-1, definitions as it pertains to barns and riding areas, agenda item number 13-092. First presentation, April 8th, regular council meeting, discussed at the April 15th council work session. Ms. Kathy Field.
And as I mentioned, these are definitions needed to further clarify the new use permit that you've just approved.
Make the motion.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, there is no public comment from this.
Sorry.
close the public hearing.
I'll close the public hearing since there's no public comment. Now open up for a motion.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, do I have a second?
I move that
No,
we,
we're needing a motion.
pardon me?
Yeah, I need a motion, sorry.
An emotion or a motion? No. I
We
move
talked
that
later.
we approve the consideration of RZ 13-09 to amend Chapter 64 zoning ordinance, Article 1, in general, Section 64-1, definitions as it pertains to barns and riding areas, agenda item number 13-092.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Lodge, second by Councilmember Kuntz. Any discussion for approval? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, let's move on to unfinished business. Mr. Clerk.
The first item is consideration of an ordinance to adopt amendments to fiscal 2013 budget for each fund of the city of Milton, Georgia, amending the amount shown in each budget as expenditures, amending the several items of revenue anticipations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. So agenda item number 13-008, first presentation April 8th, discussed at the April 15th council meeting, a presentation and public hearing heard tonight on April 22nd. Ms. Stacy Inglis.
Try to make this short and sweet. Revenue appropriation increase will increase is by, oh Lord have mercy. Revenue appropriation increases by $393,416. Expenditure appropriations will increase by $1,276,282. The difference of $882,866 will come out of fund balance. We have already gone through everything in detail. I will be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, any questions? Okay, any questions?
Mayor, I'll make a
Do we need
motion to,
We need a
I'll
public
make a
hearing on
motion to approve the consideration of an ordinance to adopt amendments to the fiscal 2013 budget for each fund of the city of Milton, Georgia, amending the amounts shown in each budget as expenditures, amending the several items of revenue anticipations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available, agenda item number 13-088.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Thurman, and I think a second by Councilmember Coons. I think you guys were planning that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Kathy. Just make sure from now, I didn't read the rules about having your phone turned off, but next time. Thank you. Gonna have a little levity here.
Without a doubt. I'm all for that.
All right, let's move on.
All
to
right, moving on to new business. One item, consideration of a conflict waiver regarding Gerard and Davis LLP's representation of the city of Milton in relation to Brooks Land Incorporated debtor Jordan Lubin Movant versus Forsyth County, Georgia, Forsyth County Tax Commissioner, City of Milton, Georgia, PNC Bank, N.A. Agenda item 13-104, Ken Gerard.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this case is actually sort of a perfect storm of every one of my clients I represent in any capacity anywhere. It's the craziest thing ever, and involves Brook Land, who, as you know, was the original developer of the Manor subdivision, which is a sort of an interesting development because a lot of the land area is in actually Milton, but then the sewer plant that actually services the subdivision is in Forsyth County, and then of course there's the Manor North in Cherokee County. And Brooks Land is now in bankruptcy, and actually Forsyth County and Milton are actually named parties, at least on the bankruptcy pleadings. There's no exposure there, you're just named. And Cherokee County is actually listed also. So I've had to get conflict waivers from both Forsyth County and Cherokee County, and now I'm coming to you. Really what's happening now is there's actually some activity in this bankruptcy. The bankruptcy trustee is trying to sell off all of Brooks Land's assets. And they're trying to develop some of the additional phases of that subdivision. Right now, Ryland Homes has got a big one. They're, of course, trying to buy some sewer capacity, so I've had to attend some hearings with respect to that capacity, but quite frankly, I'm wearing more of a Forsyth County hat because we own the sewer plant, and much less of a Milton hat because really you all have, not really, Milton doesn't have a great deal of interest in it right now, but I do need the conflict waiver. I just, basically, this is, you're telling me that I can legally move forward and ethically move forward and sort of represent the various interests. I will tell you that if I ever felt, that there was any sort of a conflict where I couldn't represent Milton's interests zealously, I would let you know, and there's just nothing right now that would impact that.
I just have one question.
Yes,
When
ma'am.
that property was originally zoned, there were some, the sewer is in Forsyth for a reason.
Yes, ma'am.
But the properties that are within the city of Milton, I know there were some pretty strict conditions put on those, and I assumed that if any of those conditions were to change or not being met, they would have to come back before us for a rezoning.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Any of the property that's in foreclosure or in bankruptcy right now, is any of that in Milton?
Councilmember Lusk, I think that it is.
It
I
is.
think I think it both is some in Cherokee and in Milton.
Is that property, do you know, that Ryland's purchased?
I think that the property that Ryland has purchased, I think it's in Milton proper.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Robin's confirmed they're getting LDP, so they are certainly in Milton.
All right. Were there zoning requirements on lot sizes?
Okay. Robin just said it's AG1, so there's really literally very little as far as the zoning requirements at all on that parcel.
Well, the issue was though whether or not the 1 acre included part of the golf course in determining the 1 acre or not. So, I mean, I think there are some issues that we just need to make sure that we are complying with
Is that the
requirements.
same parcel we were discussing earlier today?
Well, there's another
There's two of them, isn't
pending parcel that's within the interior that you'll be hearing in, I believe it's June, for an interior parcel off of Manor Bridge Road. The intent, and I do believe there's other parcels that do include, to meet their 1 acre lot, that they do include to the center line of the road because it's a private road, as well as the golf course. So it does technically meet the 1 acre lot configuration.
We need to make sure.
Correct. And
We need
this
to be very
pending,
careful with the original zoning on that because it was very specific.
well, it might be covenants. There's no zoning case for the manor.
And I will tell you, Councilman Thurman, that the covenants are terribly powerful with respect to the manor. And there's all sorts of reuse water agreements and all sorts of various configurations projects that are being litigated on a bunch of fronts. You know, the problem was is the manor was built as a comprehensive sort of a common scheme, and sort of breaking it off into subparts is kind of challenging for everyone involved. And that's the source of some of the frustration with the bankruptcy, quite frankly.
Who's the operator of the treatment plant? Is that Forsyth?
Forsyth County.
Did anybody else have something? Okay, I'll open up for a motion on that.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve a conflict waiver regarding Gerard and Davis LLP's representation of the city of Milton in relation to Brooks Land, Inc., debtor Jordan Lubin Movant versus Forsyth County, Georgia. Forsyth Tax Commissioner, City of Milton, Georgia PNC Bank, NA, agenda item number 13-104.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Luss, second by Councilmember Thurman. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any council reports? Somebody wants to say?
No, I'll just say that Bill and I attended the Earth Day celebration on Saturday, and it was an excellent celebration. It was very well attended. I think the kids there had a great time. The weather was perfect, and I appreciate those who spent their time and effort putting it together.
And Joe and I were there too.
Oh, were y'all there? Okay. Y'all weren't there for the tree.
Me and Lance were there too.
Flag?
Y'all just
You
didn't see
left
us.
really, really early.
I didn't leave really early.
We were taking attendance. All right, yeah, thank you to our staff for that. All right, I'll move on to staff reports.
Just a couple of quick updates tonight. I know it's late and we want to get out of here. Reminder, the strategic plan update meeting that I'll need the council to attend is next Friday, May the 3rd. Our securing location, it'll be announced the next couple of days. We've got some really good quotes in from, it'll either be Crooked Creek White Columns or Atlanta National. It'll be one of the three. So we've got good quotes in from all. We're just trying to move it around so that we don't always go to the same spot. But we won't be leaving Milton. Don't worry about going to the Ritz. No, we're not going to Athens. We're going to stay right here. We're going to stay right here at home. Let you know that the next meeting of for Lost is Wednesday at 10 o'clock. I don't know, Mayor, if you got that meeting invite or not. I'm going to be able to go. Ken is not. If you want to go, you're welcome to go with me. If not, I'll go solo to that. Just let me know. And the last one is one that I want to talk about just real quickly, because you probably saw a letter that we issued, or that I issued, that I issued last week to the Division General Manager of Rural Metro Ambulance, seeking clarification on a couple of topics that we had in a phone discussion, and a couple of them that troubled me, very honestly, and I wanted to get those reduced to writing to make sure that I heard them correctly and that there wasn't some misinterpretation of what I heard versus what he said. And I gave, because of the urgency that I believe there is attached to that, I gave a deadline of tomorrow at 5 o'clock for some sort of response. Or else I truly do believe that we're starting to fracture the system to the point that the public health and welfare is at risk, and we just can't stand by and let that happen to our community. Having said that, I don't have a response to that letter. Now, granted, tonight is only Monday at about 9:30 at this point, so there's still several more hours between when we issued the letter and when we expected a response. Kind of looking for a head nod tonight that if in fact we either don't get a response or we get a response that doesn't seek to answer our questions, if you would just kind of give me and the mayor a nod that the two of us can communicate with each other, and if we decide that our questions aren't answered or that they aren't answered to our satisfaction, that we can take it to the next level, which is to ask the EMS Region 3 to go ahead and help us get answers to the questions that we've asked. I know the mayor sent me an email earlier tonight that he was looking for some direction there anyway, and that's kind of where we are. I'd like to at least wait them out till 5 o'clock to see what we get, since we kind of gave a deadline. But if we don't get anything or don't get anything satisfactory, I'd like to move it to the next level.
Sure. Okay. All right.
Deal. That's what I have. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'll have a do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion that we adjourn.
Second motion.
I have a motion, a second, that we adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Good job, Bill.
The couple that was out here until the very end, what were they here on? Oh, well. Do you know, Joe?
What's that?
The couple that was out